everyone. It's past 10:30 now. We'll make a wee start. So I think the first on the agenda, just as I get myself organised, I suppose before we get into that, I think my understanding that this meeting will be recorded and maybe out. It goes out for on YouTube, I think it is. I haven't actually got the word in front of me, but it goes out on YouTube, and so it is for public consumption at a later point in time. Sederunt and apologies is number 1 on the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. We've got 9 present this morning. 2 apologies from Councillors Nicholl and Councillor Ingalls.
Thanks so much for that, Claire. Anybody got any declarations of interest in regards to? Nope, take that as a no. Item number 3 is minute of the meeting, 14th of December. That's for noting, I see. So note. Willie?
Yeah, Chair, it's just on page 4 of 62, and it's item 5.3. Aye. Where it says that a report will be brought back to this meeting in spring 2018 for consideration of complaints process for councillors. Just wondered where we were, Chair.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. I think others have maybe picked up on that as well, Willie. So a point of clarity in regards to that. Yeah, maybe I should have picked up on that myself as chair, so I don't mind being criticised. But just, Ron, have you got any awareness of that? But I think it's important that we do see that back.
Yeah, apologies for the delay with it. There's actually been a piece of work by some of the monitoring officers through the Standards Commission on that, and there's been a lot of sort of round-robin correspondence. The general point is that other councils that we have been in touch with, none of them have a process for member complaints, but they do have it for specific issues rather than a whole procedure and system. So I will bring an update report on that to the next committee. That should be ready by then.
Willie?
I don't know if I should be worried when commissioners are mentioned, but however, it also says there about it's not just the council, it's the NHS, Dumfries and Galloway, and really a reference to IJB. If that'll include both.
5.5.2, Will, is it? You're talking about how the council complaints process.
5.52.
Yep. I can provide members with an update on that. At the moment, we're actually reviewing the whole work of the complaints unit, the structure of the unit, and also the whole complaints process. We should have that report in a month's time. Someone's in preparing that at the moment. There was an opportunity with staff leaving and taking other jobs in other councils just to really look at the whole process, but also the structure. So we took that opportunity, and that's made it take a little bit longer. But we are aiming to have a complaints process that is less about the process and more about addressing the problem in the first place. So that's what we're working to.
Well, certainly support that.
Chair, both of the Councillor Scobie raised about the complaints process, and the armed services they've had a complaints process for a number of years, dealing with people in the ranks, and it goes through the board. But when you mention about the complaints process, I would expect this panel, if there is a panel going to be set up at the end of the day, to be independently chaired with elected members on it as well. If there's a process that's going to be set up in Dumfries and Galloway, I think we've got to be open and transparent, Chair.
No, I would imagine the update report that's coming, Graham, we'll be able to get a full discussion in regards to that at the time. And heartened to hear what Ron is saying there in regards to 5.5.2. To be about the solution, I think, is what I'm hearing. That's how we resolve an issue rather than the actual process itself, which certainly is a more important thing. So it's certainly not matters arising, but these are points of clarity I think have been asked for. So if it's a point of clarity, happy, Patsy?
It's just that we've had a discussion about something, and council being council, it'll get left in this last month's minutes, not this meeting's minutes. And I think we need to have somewhere where we can refer back to it in 3 months' time or 2 months' time when we come back to next meeting, because we lose things.
Yep.
And suddenly we think we remember and we don't. And it's just, I think it should be put down as action to be done as a result of this discussion, somehow.
Yep, no, I would agree with that. So can we have that minuted in that fact? And just I think that's what Patsy's asking for. We'll have that contained within the minute.
Yeah, I can confirm. I'll put a procedural note in the minute to reflect the update in the 2 reports.
Which was, I think, 5.4 and 5.5.2. Okay, let's get to item number 4. Item number 4 is internal audit reports issued in the first quarter for 2018. This is a standing item on the agenda of the committee to allow members to discuss reports issued by our internal auditors. Recommendations is members are asked to note and comment on the initial audit reports. But before I open up to members, Kevin, I wonder for yourself, do you want to say anything to these? You're more than welcome to give a summary.
I'm happy to go with the reports. I usually go with them individually, Chair, and ask if there's any questions on them. While I'm here, introduce Gillian Brideson, Head of Schools, who is available to help members in any discussion they want to have about the first report on this list, pupil equity funding.
Okay, thanks very much, Kevin. So nothing to add there, and welcome, Gillian. So we'll take them individually, as we have done in the past. So, internal audit, pupil equity fund. I think that's where Gillian's experience comes in here. Have you got any particular points we'd like to raise in regards to the pupil equity fund? Patsy.
How do we know if it's working? With attainment, it's very fluid, it's flexible, it's interpretation, if you like. Well, it should be factual, because presumably it should be to do with, I imagine, exam results and things like, and test results and things like that. And the other thing I was just wondering, I mean, are we using this money just to stopgap something that the council have stopped doing, or is it actual additional money going to additional projects? And how do we monitor it?
Thank you very much. Good morning, members. Thank you, Chair. There were a lot of questions we needed to look at as part of this internal audit. I'm very grateful to Kevin and his team for taking this on, because it was helpful to have an outside eye. Clearly, it's part of our scrutiny quality of assurance process in terms of reducing the poverty-related attainment gap, which is multifactorial, long-standing and very complex, as you highlight. And a 9-month allocation of funding is not going to solve that, or we would have done that some time ago, but it is welcomed. So that we looked at this really in 3 tranches. And the first was specifically, how did we as an authority allocate this money to schools? Politically, it was very clear by the Deputy First Minister that this money was coming directly to schools. And we took the clear and early decision to allocate all of the money. Now, some authorities top sliced in terms of administration and management costs, but we allocated all the money quickly to schools so that they had the full academic year to use that. And that was something that Kevin was clear that he wanted to look at, whether we had in fact followed the rules of Scottish Government by allocating it fully. So we did that. We were then able to have a light touch assurance in terms of how schools were addressing the additionality, not substitution, because that also was part of the National Operating Guidance. This money could not be used to shore up reductions in other areas. So it had to be additional, not substitutional. So we had to get some clear understanding in the paperwork that we had back from the schools that this was not paying for things that schools could no longer afford to do. So that was part of the monitoring process. And then the $1 million question is whether or not it made a difference to children's learning. That's not going to happen in 6 months, but it certainly is monitored as part of our key performance indicators, our Scottish Government reports and our National Improvement Framework. And I'm pleased that this week the Local Government Benchmarking Framework indicators were published, which shows that we are on the national average, if not above. We're not certainly sitting, we're in a comfortable position, we're not complacent, there's work to do, but we know that particularly for our poorer children, they get a good deal in terms of outcomes. So it's a work in progress, it's a council priority to reduce the poverty-related attainment gap, and pupil equity funding is not going to do it alone, because it's what we're all doing as part of our overall quality assurance.
But at item 6 on the report, it says the education services are introducing measures to help demonstrate whether PEF funding is effective at reducing the attainment gap. It is also considering further involvement by parents. These measures should help improve the use of the funding. But what happens if it doesn't? Do we have to repay the funding? How do you monitor whether it is or not? I mean, we're getting all the good words, and we're getting all the promises, but how do we get the facts of whether this is actually value for money and money well spent?
It's not just pupil equity funding that is targeted to reduce the poverty-related attainment gap. So that's all the work of the schools, and that's what the national direction is. All of our schools should be doing that all of the time, but pupil equity funding is to give that additional support, direct funding to head teachers in conjunction with parents. So the issue in item 6 was looking at involvement of parents. We know that some schools, probably because of the timescales that were offered, had not involved parents in the agreement of the spend at such an early stage. The money was allocated in May, school improvement plans have to be written and submitted by June, so there wasn't a great deal of time to have full consultation with parents as to what that money was supposed to be for. So that will improve this coming year. There's also an element that some parents are quite comfortable and trust the schools that they will spend their money in order to reduce. They'll spend their money wisely, and some schools find it difficult to engage parents. So we've appointed or realigned a task for a pupil involvement officer to work with schools specifically to engage the more hard-to-reach parents so that they are more closely involved in how we spend that money. But the measures for closing the poverty-related attainment gap are very clear. You've got your primary 1, primary 3, primary 5, S3, and then your senior phase attainment in literacy and numeracy. And those are measures which are reported on a quarterly basis to Area Committee, to Full Council, and also to Scottish Government. And those are the national measures for attainment.
How do we know if those results that we get at Area Committee, for instance, have been using this money? Are they identified as schools that are receiving special amounts of money because they have children that are needing it, or is it just we just are ignorant of which schools get help?
There's only one school that does not. So I think there's 115 schools, 116 schools in total, 115 schools do. But the money ranges from one school had one eligible child, so that was £1,200. There was another primary school, a large primary school, got £190,000. So the amounts of money are different, but we could make the judgment that all schools should be working on this agenda. So the actual spend is part of what the schools are doing as a whole. But we should be able to see specifically all schools will report their SIMD 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 children for those measures in primary 1, primary 3, primary 5, S3 and senior phase.
Thanks for that, Gillian. Wally, you're next, and you can use the same format as what we've used to. You can follow through in your questions.
Thanks, Chair. Patch has picked up, but I would go back to 413, aligning that to item 6. And really ask, is this no too much of a premature report on an audit? Because we've nothing here that we could say is tangible in terms of how we can measure the success of the PEF. I'd prefer that they put it into core funding rather than pupil equity funding, because we need a measure to see if it's moving forward. And to be frank, I can't see anything that we're seeing here. It's a page of fine words, Gillian. That's not a criticism, but there's nothing that you can see how it's operating in any of the schools. Now, whether we deal with that at Area Committee or here as the Audit and Risk, I just wonder if it's premature in that we need to see the results of PEF, how it's operating and how effective it is, because I'm looking here at learning assistance, and there's a big issue in there for me, both in primary and secondary, in terms of the pupils who require additional support for learning, and whether PEF is able to be used to assist those kids. Some may not be receiving the support for learners, but there's nothing to indicate here on measure. Now, it could be going on, but I can't see it. Is it premature, Chair?
I mean, I think we were not involved in the discussion of timing. We were, that decision was taken by this committee, that the timing of this report coming forward. And there was a few questions raised by head teachers of why are we auditing this at this point? We only got the money in May, and we're coming in to do questioning on impact in August and September. However, the purpose of the audit was to see whether or not the authority support. Did we allocate the money as per the rules? Had we operational guidance? Did we have procedures and processes in place to undertake those quality assurance discussions? And Kevin and his team were able to identify that we do. I think the proof of the pudding now is, going back to Councillor Gilroy's question, is our ongoing quality assurance and reporting mechanisms now need to show the impact of this spend. But it is very early. We've only really had 9 months of operation, and then we can begin to see the impact of any spend. But it, you will get the reports as part of your business plans, part of the KPIs in time. Take your point about the timing.
I'm not sure how that's assess audit and risk, even at 9-month point, and when it would be right to bring this back, that the PEF is having an effect, and for audit and risk to look at that just to see how effective it is being. When's the right date then for that report to come to us so that we can see the effect of PEF?
Chair, this was a new programme. It had specific measures attached to it or specific requirements attached to it. In terms of assessing it for an audit, we felt it was important to get some feedback early on about the implementation of the programme, less about the actual outcomes from the programme, which were set by the Scottish Government. So bear in mind the Scottish Government set this up, decided to operate it in this way. Pupil attainment is a shared objective, and in particular pupil attainment for kids from poor backgrounds with difficulties and so on is a particularly strong shared objective. And as Gillian says, it's a programme of work which has been ongoing, has a number of streams into it, a number of funding mechanisms, a number of efforts being made to it. PEF was something very specific. It was new. It was unusual in the sense that nothing came to local authorities, so to speak. The money went directly to schools. As auditors, we felt it was important to get an early assurance that something was in place to deliver this programme and we weren't cheating on it. And the message of this report is very clearly, we're not cheating on it. It did present some serious challenges, I think, both for schools who need to understand that there are strings attached to this money and ultimately we're looking for outcomes from the money, but also for the Education Authority, which had to find resources to try and support this and to try and both support schools to deliver this and also challenge them. There's an element of challenge involved in PEF as well to schools to make sure that they're using the money wisely. And those resources were not provided to education through this programme. So, but we felt as auditors it was important to get this early assurance, and that's why it was done at this particular time. You should see the results of PEF if it works, and there's no certainty it will work, but if it works, you'll begin to see the results coming through in the statistics and measures that Gillian's talking about, which are very carefully monitored and reported fully back to committee, particularly the Education Committee. So this was about something new. Are we doing it right? And the answer to that is yes, we are.
Okay, I've got a couple of hands up. Go on in. I've got Matthew, then Malcolm. Was it Malcolm? Age before? No, I'll not say that. I'll not repeat what was said.
Now, I think really, at the moment, I understand your audit was about how the thing's been implemented and set up, and that's fine. But I think going forward, the crux of the matter is if there is any improvement in attainment or not, and if that is indeed down to this PEF programme or not. I think as there mechanisms have been put into place to find that out, because that really is the key, whether we're getting value for money from this or not. And that's how you then extrapolate from the figures that it is a result of PEF rather than some other effect.
Well, as I say, Chair, it's a shared objective. I would imagine, in fact, I'd be very surprised if there isn't a national study done on this in the future, because I think it's of great interest. People want to know if this approach works. They also want to know that the money's been spent wisely. So I'm picturing, and part of our pitch for doing this audit was to say, I think in 2 or 3 years' time, there'll be a national study done on this. And it'll be very interesting to see what comments and observations are made about the approach to the programme taken by the Scottish Government. But in terms of outcomes locally, shared objective, we all want to see an improvement. It's something that receives a lot of attention, rightly, from members and a lot of attention from education as well. So, it's something we're all working on, I think.
Thank you. 2 quick questions. Do the schools report back? Is there a system in place for them to report back to you guys? And if so, how regularly are they doing that?
Very much, and that's the support and challenge role of the local authority and that Kevin referred to. So an education officer will attend on a termly basis to meet each head teacher for a support and challenge discussion based on the measures that Kevin outlined. So a school improvement plan is submitted, it's a statutory document, submitted to us in June, and then we meet on a termly basis to follow through on the targets for that year. And then all schools will then submit a standards and quality report, which again is a statutory duty for a head teacher, which is submitted back to us and is now reported also back to Scottish Government in June. And that's once a year. So the pupil equity funding was seen by us as part of that. It didn't seem sensible given the reducing bureaucracy agenda of Scottish Government. We also felt that we couldn't have two processes. We needed to have one process. And the guidance originally was that it should be a light touch challenge, that this was head teachers' money. It was head teachers who should have the power with their communities, and our challenge role was seen to be a stage to make sure that head teachers followed procurement rules and employment rules. That was seen as our role. But over the year, that message evolved, I think that would be fair to say, and certainly the new iteration of the guidance puts more of a challenge on local authorities in terms of making sure that the funding is spent wisely. And as Kevin highlighted, that has put pressure on the education service because there's now an additional layer of monitoring that is expected for pupil equity fund. And because we allocated all the fund directly to the schools, that has caused pressure. We didn't have a budget, we didn't have people to do that, and we've now had to bring that on board. But yes, in answer to your question, there's quite regular monitoring on pupil equity fund.
Other question was, do we know how long the Scottish Government are committing this money to you?
Again, there's a commitment for the term of this Parliament. That's what we've been indicating.
I suppose the point that Wally brought up earlier in regards to the appropriateness of another report coming back, similar to this, have you got a particular view in regards to that? Because to me it sounds like probably in about a year's time or something like that, but just, because we need things to bed in. I would imagine that's what the committee are thinking of. When do we see this again? I find it very interesting personally, but that's a personal view. But so what do you think then for yourselves in regards to bringing an appropriate timeline so we've got enough information to actually scrutinise this properly?
In terms of impact for young people, it would be useful for after the summer. So it would probably be in September, because then we would have indications from the primary school assessments are submitted in June. So that would give us opportunity to analyse them and report and come back after the summer.
What does the committee feel about that? Would your hand up there, Matthew? No? We'll get one last question, we'll come back to it and we'll probably just agree to the September timeline. Matthew?
Sorry, is there any areas that the schools are not allowed to spend the money on? Can they employ additional staff? Can they use it for, how structured is the spend? I'm thinking specifically of the school. I did a little sum there on how many pupils the school that you were detailing was £190,000. So if you suddenly had that flooding into your bank account, the first thing you would probably be thinking about was human resources.
This is a really significant shift. I think it is an interesting. It's a very significant shift in the relationship between local authorities and schools. And yes, £190,000, you're going to employ staff. 40% of PEF, by our initial calculations, is about 40% of the spend has been on staff, either teaching staff or support staff. But that brings employment challenges, because the schools have to abide by Dumfries and Galloway Council employment rules, and therefore they have to go through the normal processes, and that has required finance to change the way that they authorise those posts, because it's not core funding. It also means that because the money is not permanent, they can only appoint on a temporary basis. So it's caused head teachers, there's been a learning curve for head teachers, because they have to almost become employment specialists and ensure that temporary contracts they cease in June, so that the people then don't accrue employment rights, because the pupil equity funding is not a permanent funding stream. So it's brought a lot of operational challenges for schools, and not all head teachers have warmly welcomed this direct funding. I think it would be fair to say some have, but some have found it challenging to monitor.
Thank you. What happens if it stops?
we have advised all head teachers that this should not be seen as core funding, that it should be, all projects should be put in place for an August to August cycle, and that their work is to ensure that it's sustainable. So programs such as family learning programs, again, the additionality, not substitutional, is absolutely key here. This should be an additional project to reduce the poverty-related attainment gap. It should not be core, because then if in a few years' time it ceases, we then have a gap to fill.
I suppose that's the point we need in the next report as well, because it is important, isn't it? If the report comes forward, that's an identified risk. Because if somebody's, I think it's over 2 years, then becoming an employee of the council, no compulsory redundancy policy and so on and so forth, so it adds a pressure, and if the funding stops after this Parliament term, then I think that's probably what you're picking up on. I mean, does it have a burden on the council later on in years? Again, is that type of legacy to it? I think we have to at least look at that and consider it. So, okay, when it comes back to, if I haven't got any other further questions, we're quite content to see it coming back September time. Take that as a yes. Thanks very much. Thank you. Kevin? Yep.
Chair, I take it a year hence, not this September. I assumed you were talking about September of next year.
Is that what you meant, Gillian?
Yes.
Yep. No, I would have thought that would be right, because we've got a real lack of information certainly at the moment. So we're looking at 2019. I would think, and like you say, we need the fullest of information. This is going ahead anyways. We see it through area committees and such like. So no, I think that'd be appropriate timing. So for the access at the minute, then that's September 19 we're talking about. Okay, thanks very much, Gillian. Cheers. Internal Audit Review, Project and Programme Management. This is open to members again. Project and Programme Management. This is our second review. Any particular points? I suppose, Wally? Yep.
Yeah, Chair, it's not a very positive report looking at it. I'm looking at 4.5. Programme of Board to each director has been established, and it goes on to say these boards are not able to meet frequently enough to provide close oversight of all projects. 4.6, the audit found that project mandates are not, however, being developed for all projects. 4.7, in practice there is a significant subjectivity in how projects are rated, and it would be good practice for all scores to be peer reviewed with directorates. And again it goes on, our project's roles and responsibilities clearly established. It was not evident from any of the projects we reviewed that the roles and responsibilities are there. Risk management, no evidence of regular risks, review of risks where they are recorded. I'm looking at particular to the Sederunt waterfront, where we had 4 years and no reporting back, no stakeholder involvement and so forth, and yet the risk to the council has been severely damaged in Sederunt at least. So what projects were looked at in terms of audit and risk? And if I take that as an example, we have done extremely badly in terms of keeping people advised, reporting back, to the point where it was reported in the local papers that a complete computer had been wiped with information that was being sought. Where's the risk to the council in terms of making sure that these, where we've got projects, that they are being properly managed, that the roles and responsibilities are being adhered to, and so forth and so on? It doesn't come out. In fact, it's very, and that's not a criticism, that's Kevin reporting as it is. Yet what are we doing as an audit and risk? So it's not directed at Kevin, it's directed at us. What are we doing about it?
I think it's very appropriate. DG once came into my mind, Willie, you've used Sederunt as waterfront as that when I read this, but information and records management, that's very important. Again, my understanding is that if, say, a computer was to be wiped, it's backed up somewhere else anyway, so that information is still there for up to a length of time. So I don't know if you can actually speak to that or not, Kevin, if you've got that level of, is there something on tomorrow as well? It's away from here, but I think we've actually got some kind of programme of work on tomorrow in regards to records management. Members should be involved in that. So I just do think information, for what you've said there, for what I can understand, my understanding is that it's up to probably 6 years Information Commissioner's Office would ultimately be could determine, but if they need information, if somebody wipes their emails, so to speak, then information's still there. Willie? I don't know if you can speak to that, Kevin, at all or not.
Chair, I think Kevin should be commended for his report. He's been quite candid in what he's put forward. It's what do we do as an Audit and Risk Committee in terms of what's in the report? And I only used Stranraer, you've used DG1. For your information, that has been reported, as I understand it, to the Information Commission in terms of a computer being wiped. Now, that was the response from the council. Yeah. Things like this shouldn't happen, yet what do we do as an Audit and Risk Committee?
So I suppose I'll ask Kevin to make any points that he wants to make, because he seems quite keen to speak. So give him a chance to allow that, and kind of go back to it. Like, to me, there's a 30th of April. I think we've got a meeting booked in regards to the inquiry that kind of feeds a wee bit into this as well, about DG1. So maybe on the back of, after that, we can get to see what the learning points are, because ultimately that's what this is about. But Kevin.
Chair, yes, speaking to the broader point about records management, I can't say a lot about it other than there is a tremendous effort going on at the moment to try and improve records management and to secure records for the future in an appropriate way. We're moving to paperless offices, these sorts of things, so there needs to be much more structure. We have things like GDPR regulations and things coming in, which all have an impact on the way that records are kept and how information is kept. In general terms, the council decides how long to keep things for, and it sort of publishes that in a scheme. There is it's a scheme of publication, which basically means things that we produce that we are happy to share with the public and so on. We record all that information, how long we're keeping it for, and these sorts of things. Now, there's huge pressure to reduce how long we keep records for, because there are issues around confidentiality and keeping information up to date and these sorts of things. So it's terribly important sometimes that we in fact dispose of records in a timely fashion. So not everything is kept forever. In particular in relation to capital projects and so on, I tend to expect records to be kept a bit longer, but I may be disappointed on that in the future, in the sense of, as an auditor, I can go back 10, 12 years if I need be. But if that information isn't there to audit, it's not there to audit. That's all there is to be said about it. So records management generally is a complex business, and council is working very hard on that at the moment. I don't know about the specific case you're referring to, or that the council is referring to, Chair, unfortunately, so I can't comment on that. In terms of this report, a quick bit of context, so we don't misdirect the discussion. The council adopted programme and project management standards as a tool, as a device, as a mechanism to try and improve the management of projects. That's what the PPM stuff is about. And what this audit is about is we felt it was too soon to audit any individual projects in terms of their compliance with PPM standards, because the PPM standards came in a sort of phased basis. They were originally introduced and literally a standard was raised, excuse the pun, in terms of expectations. This is what we should be working to. And it took a little while to start to bring in further information, further support, further guidance. So they've been around for a while, but they've not been implemented fully, and they're still not fully implemented. Some aspects of them still present some challenges for some services. So the purpose of this audit was less about auditing individual projects, and therefore, there's not a lot of point, I think, in talking about specific projects we might or might not have looked at. What we were going for was, are the standards themselves adequate, complete, comprehensive? Are there any issues with them? So we went out and spoke to various people about how they're finding the standards, whether they're finding them useful, how much of a challenge they're finding to implement, which bits of them may not be working properly. So this is a report that's directed to the lead officer with responsibility for programme and project management standards. And you're saying, what can the committee do? This report has been received by that officer and acknowledged by them as useful because it provides some pointers where improvements in the standards would be useful and more likely to secure compliance and adherence to them. But it is a work in progress. PPMs are very much still a work in progress. And in some areas, we're pointing out certain facts, such as project mandates, the agreement to a project going ahead, it having its authority and all these sorts of things in a structured way. that's old hat. You know, that's been around for quite a long time. It's something the council's never been terribly good at doing it. And in fact, we're still finding problems associated with it. There are some projects which progress which don't have structured and proper mandates on them. But we're also revealing the fact that there's an element of bureaucracy associated with something like this. There is an administrative burden associated with it, which again, departments are finding quite challenging to deal with. So the comments around the project board, we have to say this, we have to say, looking at the volume of work at directorate level where the programme board sits, it's very, very challenging to get into any sort of level of detail for the number of projects that are coming forward. So in effect, we're presenting a dilemma for others to think about, which is to say, do you want to bureaucratize this process? In which case, you know, things will slow down, things will become more expensive to deliver. There'll be much more focus and attention having to give to the detail. At the moment, directorates are happy with this approach, with the current approach, which is directorate level project boards where issues come forward, and there's an expectation, certainly on the part of directors, that issues associated with projects get brought up. They don't have to chase individual projects and get affirmations on individual projects. There's an expectation that exceptions and problems will be coming into the project board. And I think that's a reasonable expectation. But it does mean perhaps that projects are not being very closely managed at a senior level, at perhaps sufficiently senior level. And if you like, that's the dilemma that the council faces. Now, overall, you've got to look at where the council is going, how many projects it's going to have, what its ambitions are. This year in particular, on capital, we've spent a phenomenal amount of money, far more money than we've spent in the past. That's because there was a bit of a lump in our capital programme. A number of things came together. So there's been a tremendous sort of capital spend this year in relation to other years. That is going to fall. We'll have fewer projects, perhaps, less intensity going into the future. And that also might perhaps give us an opportunity to start to get project management spot on. But as I say, there's always a balance between bureaucratization and execution. And the question is, how much do you put into controlling the projects, micro-controlling them to the point when they almost become not deliverable because we're so micromanaging them, and delivering things, delivering assets for the community of Dumfries and Galloway, and, meeting members' desires, ambitions, fulfilling the corporate plan, these sorts of things. How do we get that balance right? And the management standards themselves are designed to provide a basic checklist for people in terms of delivering projects. Here are the things that need to be attended to stop things from going wrong. They're not always implemented in full in every situation. And again, that flexibility is within the system, it's within the scheme, it's meant to be there. So it's not, I'm sorry if you feel it's a very negative report. It's not really a negative report. It's a contribution to try and make sure that we get this right in the future.
I certainly don't see it as a negative report at all. Willie, then I'll let Jean in after that.
Yeah, Chair, I did say it's a candid report. It's given us warts and all, and indeed all that Kevin said there in his narrative is contained in item 5, which again, I-5.2 talks about it at an early stage and then underdeveloped. Will work with a programme management group. I consider it's for the administration to hold the officers to account and to make sure that the projects are being delivered. How they do that's up to the administration. From backbencher through audit and risk is about how holding the administration to account. Now, whether I have sympathy or not with what Kevin's saying, then this is coming over. I did commend Kevin for his report, and I wasn't patronising. What I'm saying is that there's a lot here. When would it be appropriate then to come forward and say that things are in place, standards are to an acceptable level, and then we can look at the projects being delivered in an efficient and effective way where there is the risk to the council is being considered?
I personally think, well, that is under item number 9, we've got an opportunity there, for likes of what you're talking about, to have a scrutiny review, where you used Stranraer Waterfront as an example. So we're going back, and then after that, it's a piece of work. So I think there's potentially 3 projects we could outline, just add an extra recommendation to the scrutiny review. So it's away from here, but I think ultimately, if we could scrutinise particular projects that we've got an interest in, get to the bottom of that, then we could then instruct Kevin thereafter in regards to any further reporting, which we would think was the right place to be looking at. So, well, if you're in the mind, I'll bring it up at that point. If that's okay, I'll remind you at that time. Jane?
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't feel that this was in any shape or form a sort of really gloomy report. I thought it was really asking questions as opposed to being a gloomy report. Kevin said that exceptions and problems should bubble to the surface, so it should almost be through exception reporting that we should hear that something has maybe been substandard. And it wasn't clear to me in this. I mean, 5.2 talks about current arrangements through programme management boards are underdeveloped in terms of that standards are being effectively applied. As far as members are concerned, what are the trigger points whereby it would necessarily come to members? Because that's what people are interested in when there is a clear series of points that it should automatically be reported to members. Because I think that helps then with officers thinking, I must follow guidance because otherwise that will trigger an extra bit of work.
As referenced elsewhere on the agenda, Chair, there are standards or reporting protocols for when capital projects overrun, and that's in terms of overrunning on time or overrunning on finances. So we've already got that set of protocols. In terms of not adherence to project management standards and so on, the standards are there to help guide people and help achieve a good outcome for them. I don't think they can ever be absolute. I think a degree of flexibility is always going to be required, particularly in delivering some complex projects. So the standards really are there to say, if you do these things, you're more likely to have a successful project, but they're not a guarantee for a successful project. And equally, not adhering to the standards does not guarantee you're going to have a ruined project. So to some extent, it is the scrutiny process of individual projects that perhaps go wrong or perhaps have issues with them. Amongst the questions that members should be asking then is, were project and program management standards, how were they used in connection with this? And again, in terms of identifying any potential weaknesses within the standards themselves, that kind of analysis can be very helpful in terms of saying, well, yeah, we ticked all the boxes, but we still had these issues which were unexpected and so on. Now, risk management as a good example, risk management should be being used in projects. And it was one of the strengths for a long time. Risk management in projects was one of the things that Council was doing successfully. And we have seen less visibility of it during this audit. But it's not fatal. That doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means for what we looked at in connection with this project, we didn't see a lot of evidence of a structured approach to risk management being taken. But the difficulty with risk management, again, always is that there's a whole bureaucracy, potential bureaucracy associated with it. You can turn it into an industry if you want to do that. So risk management is taking place in the Council in an unstructured and informal way. It is going on, and we propose to bring a report back to the next committee on that with some information about how risk management is being used within the Council and where it's being used. So, risk management here, you don't want to choke the project for risk management. But on the other hand, ignoring risk management is very unwise and very foolish. You should be attending to it at a basic level. But the best advice I can give you is to say, well, when projects go wrong, and hopefully there will be very few going into the future as a result of these standards, you should, amongst the questions you should be asking is, how and did project management standards contribute to that in any way? Did they stop it from being worse, or did they, in the end, make the problem more challenging to deal with?
No, thanks very much for that. Any other questions in regards to that particular item? No. Okay, we've got spend to save next, I think it is. Capital spend to save. Got your name down here, Malcolm, for some reason. I don't know why that is. He was listening. Graham first anyways, then Malcolm.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, about spend to save, I've got concerns obviously about the vehicle fleet replacement, 4.16, page 3. Obviously, these 17 waste collection vehicles are, I believe, am I right in believing a number of them are still not been used? Obviously, there was a number of bins were bought on 2013 to do with this rollout process as well. 70,000 bins, it's not mentioned on here, under the vehicle replacement. Are these vehicles been used? Am I right in believing some of them haven't been rolled out due to the process in the west? Obviously, you have a single bin in the east of the region, and the west of the region have got a multi-bin process. So how many of these wagons are lying dormant at present time? If you're talking about spend to save, well, this is not. We're not actually. This is not good value money for the taxpayers. I've still got concerns about this, so we need to know a wee bit more about. Are these vehicles still sitting in the premises? There will be depreciation, and the warranty will be running out of them now.
Thank you, Chair. We're actually talking about two completely separate issues. And I can speak lightly to one of them. RCVs, refuse collection vehicles, the sorts of things that go up and down our streets, and lift bins and so on. This was a switch into a different type of financing arrangement, and it led to savings. This is a successful one. These vehicles bought through this spend to save measure are all in use. They're being used. RCVs are heavily used within the council. They're workhorses, and they're worked quite hard. What the council is talking about is in connection with the waste management strategy, which members I'm sure are familiar with, which included the acquisition of certain assets. So it was boxes and a different type of vehicle, a particular type of vehicle for collecting recyclate materials and so on. We did, as a council, get funding support for the purchase of those. So I've not checked it personally, but I've heard it said that effectively we were given the money to buy those vehicles. And certainly the last time I looked at this, when the project in the West was being reset, you may remember there was a trial done, a retrial done. So we put in a multi-bin collection system. There were some issues with that. There was a reset of that, and a trial was run on that. And as part of the discussions around that trial, there were comments to the fact that we might indeed have to have a different style of vehicle for collecting recyclates. And they were in discussions with Zero Waste Scotland about perhaps returning some of those vehicles back to Zero Waste Scotland, who would then put them in other councils who needed them, because the particular vehicles that we had acquired were not suiting the operational parameters that we wanted to introduce. It's to do with how quickly the compartments fill up. I think at one stage where the refuse operators, I think, doing vehicle side sorting into about 6 or 7 different fractions, I think. And so the vehicle didn't lend itself to the relative proportions of those. So there was discussion around returning some of those vehicles. So they are two separate and distinct issues, Chair. I'm not up to speed, I'm afraid, with the refuse project in the West, so I can't comment beyond that.
No, I think you should demonstrate quite a considerable amount of knowledge there. Malcolm?
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually all in favour of spend to save. I think it's quite a good thing to be doing. The problem I've got reading through this is the criteria seem to be all over the place. There doesn't seem to be definite targets for how much is meant to be being saved in a percentage or a time basis, or what the payback period is. It's well, for example, we look at this table here on page 4, and it ranges from 26 years to 6 years. Some of the things I would imagine the payback was mentioned, it's so long that the asset will probably not be functioning. And now when I get to the Dumfries fibre network, this one here, the business case, I find actually, it's laughable really, to be honest. It said it will save many millions over 25 years. Now really that doesn't sound like it's been a very well thought out plan at all. And it turns out, when you drill down through it and read more of the report, get down to 4.27, it's talking about a saving of £17,500 per annum. It was also saying that, well, if we hadn't done this, we might have had to have spent 750,000. It just sounds like it's almost just been made up, and I've got a sneaky suspicion that the NHS is maybe getting a better deal out of this. I'm wondering if the council's actually subsidising the NHS with that particular project. But really, I think we need to be getting down to the situation where we've got a proper set of criteria for evaluating these schemes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad the Council picked up that point. The key message in this report is we need a decent set of parameters with which to measure things. measure proposals, prospects. Within any framework of this sort, again, a degree of flexibility. I don't think you could have it hard and fast. You know, a bank, for instance, will invest in something with a 20-year life scale. They expect to make their money back by year 8, and year 9 onwards is profit. And you know, they're happy to get into a 20-year deal like that. They get very unhappy if the money's not there. Now, in terms of a council like ours, we shouldn't really be as hard as that in terms of saying if it's not paid back within 8 years, we're not doing it, because we'd miss opportunities. So there are some genuine opportunities that have been useful that are reported here. More challenging are energy-related projects in the sense of that you know, feed-in tariffs and things like this varied about a bit. So when projects were being mooted and proposed and they seemed like a good idea and we're progressing them to deliver them, feed-in tariffs were one of the things that was not guaranteed. So you should have something called a sensitivity analysis, which basically says, see this project, you're saying it's going to pay back in 6 years, 7 years, or what happens if something changes by 10%? What's that going to change the payback period to? So, you know, and that can be different. I would imagine you'd be quite happy with the payback period, 12 or even 15 years. I think once you get to a 20-year payback period, you're beginning to sort of go, okay, this is a bit challenging. And certainly anything much beyond 20, personally, I would say is really throwing straws in the wind. But that is the point of this report, is to say what we currently lack are documented standards, if you like, to measure things against. You can vary them. There's no reason why not to flex them or to change them. But if you have something on paper, now there are some around, but they're quite old. They date back to 2005. So what we need is a fresh approach, and we've got agreement that something will be prepared to provide guidance for when to make an investment and spend to save. The point being this, and this is an important point, Chair, spend to save money is additional to, on top of, your 10-year capital investment program. So you are locked down. You've got a 10-year financial strategy, and you're pretty well locked down in terms of what resources you're going to have over the next 10 years. And sure, it's extended by a year as each year goes by, but members will be well aware that there are severe constraints coming. As I mentioned earlier, because we've spent quite a lot of money in this particular year, it means in the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be less resources available. So things are quite tight. Spend to save is on top of that. And using the figure that Finance talks about, every £1 million that you spend on capital costs you about £64,000 or £65,000 on revenue. So there are revenue pressures there. The only way that a spend to save makes sense is if you get the money back from the savings that are achieved to actually service that debt. If you don't do that, then actually you've created a problem. And Finance are very fierce on this. They are quite hot on this. And I think we are helping the situation by clarifying a little bit of history of what's gone on here. And I'm confident that we'll have a set of parameters and we'll have a fairly close analysis of any future spend to save proposals. But they are worth doing. They are worthwhile. They are definitely worth having. The more we identify, the better off we'll be, because it means we can do things and self-finance them. So we don't want to close out spend to save completely as an option, but we do need to be more careful about it.
I think I said right at the start, I'm actually a supporter of the spend to save thing. I think it's important that the council can actually take opportunities when they arise where they can invest in things and save money going forward. It was just my big concern is about the criteria, because some of them don't appear to be achieving it. And I think it would be good if, when we do establish some kind of criteria, that I would hope that members would get a chance to scrutinise that before we go ahead with it. I maybe operate more in that other world, like these nasty bankers that you talk about with 8 years sounds a long time to me, but anyway, we'll leave it at that. But really, I think my point was about the criteria. I'm well in support of spend to save if it's done properly.
Thanks very much. I've got Patsy as a first-time speaker, then Graham. Oh no, just Patsy.
Thank you. I'm looking at the solar panels, which don't seem to have delivered quite as well as one would have hoped they might have done. And I'm also looking at the business of a sinking fund to replace inverters, which hasn't been implemented or hasn't been, according to 4.15 on page 3. And I just wonder, is the sinking fund is quite important for these sort of things, because we get to an end of a time and you need some money to make the project go on if you want it to. So I'm just wondering if they're not wanting the project to continue, is that why they haven't put in a sinking fund? Because it was suggested, and I don't know who, it says here it was recommended to committee, but I don't know who by whom, and that has not been implemented, and I'm just rather concerned about that. So we're going to ditch the solar panel spend to save projects, or are we in danger of not being able to deliver because we haven't got a sinking fund to renew the inverters in 2 years' time? Or 4 years' time, rather.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's something we're pointing out. The service hasn't established a sinking fund. They had thought at the time they put the project forward that would be a way forward. So what is in fact happening is that all of the saving that's accruing is coming through as a saving. In effect, when they set the project up, they said, can we have some of the savings set aside to pay for these future costs? So we're getting a bigger saving as a result of the project than we were anticipating. That's what it comes down to. It'll have to be addressed. They'll have to deal with it. The inverters do need replaced. It makes a lot of sense to have some kind of sinking fund or some size set aside for some of the savings. Just means that the savings we're getting are slightly lower. But the project overall is producing net savings. It is saving the council money. As well as that, of course, we should say it's not just money that spent to save projects contribute. They can meet other targets, such as carbon reduction targets, energy reduction targets, these sorts of things. So certainly solar panels are seen as successful, not as successful as we would like in financial terms in some cases, because, as I say, the feed-in tariff, as it's called, got changed and is altered and is effective now. There's quite a lot of complexity to exactly how much you get and on your feed-in tariff. But nevertheless, solar panels are worth doing for environmental reasons, carbon reduction reasons, and financial reasons at the moment. It's just some of the saving, instead of being put to one side at the moment, is not, but that will get addressed. I'm confident it will.
It was it says here that it was recommended in January 2012 that a sinking fund be developed to hold funds for the replacement of the inverters, and that has absolutely not happened. And I just don't think, if it's recommended and the committee decide to do it, who decided not to?
It was less that somebody decided not to than somebody hasn't asked for it. Finance will set one up when asked to by the service. So arguably you can say the service forgot to follow it through. That's not being critical of the service, it's just something they didn't do. So it was in the report to committee about the project, and there wasn't a specific decision by members to set up a sinking fund, it was in the text, so to speak. So the recommendation was to go ahead with the project, which it was, but it wasn't to go ahead with the project and to set up a sinking fund, which would have produced the outcome that the council is talking about.
No, that's put a different slant. Any other members got any other particular points? No, thank you very much. And these parts are being noted, I see quite strongly by Claire. So creditor payments, main financial systems, creditor payments. Oh, Graham, you're first.
Thanks, Chair. It's on page 3, 4.13, ordering building services. Building services raise most of the purchase orders retrospectively. The work manual, that should be a work person for doing diversity training. Give the supplier the job number and request the materials. And the workmen take the materials to the jobs. The supplier emails the store's personnel informs that they've been picked up and an order is raised. What checks have we got on the work persons that are actually been delivered to the site, and what checks that they could be ordering 10 litres of paints or 1,000 facing bricks? How do you know they're all going to be used? Because we always hear in the grapevine that some things are walking off the site are not additionally used. You know, when you're building a house, there's always additional materials are not used: concrete, pea gravel, lengths of 4 metre piping. There's a lot of materials are not always used in a house build. But look at these renovations, or even going to do potholes or driveway. A number of tons of tar might not be used. So what checks have we got? Because there's an element of how do you say fraud involved in there. So we need to check that they're actually been used. So what processes have we got we can actually stop this?
Yes, Chair. It's concerning to an auditor that orders are retrospective. That's why we've put this in this report. We've discussed that with management, and in operational terms, they're convinced that this is the correct way to operate. We've discussed the risks. They've accepted the risks, as is their entitlement to do so. Now, it's not, we're not hunting for fraud in this report. We haven't found fraud. We're not saying people are nicking screws or not nicking screws. We could kind of end this argument. I'll give you an example. Not long after I came to the Regional Council, many years ago, I did a stock take at a depot, and we went round, and the guy completely ignored this thing in the corner, and I said, "What's that over there?" And he says, "Oh, you don't want to worry about that." So, no, come on, what is it? So we walked over. There are huge pipes, enormous pipes. You could hold a party in the size of this pipe, great big concrete thing. I said, "That's not on your stock list." He said, "No, it's not." So, come on, they must be very valuable. Why is it not? Well, the way it works is this. He said, we do a trunk road job in those days. We would order them in. He says, we'd maybe 6 of these things, but actually only use 4. So 2 get brought back to the depot. So I said, right, so do we send them back? No, we never send them back. Okay, so who's paid for them? The trunk road project paid for them. Okay, so what do we do with them now? We wait till the next trunk road project when we need this stuff, and then we'll only order 2 because we've already got 2. So across the piece, the trunk roads pick up the cost of this, but there's a period of time when this stock is sitting there and it's not in my stock book and there's no value. I could not understand this. I beat my head against a brick wall. But in the end, I came to the conclusion that, I'm not going to die on the barricades over this. And I said to the guy, please make sure it's in your stock book, okay? So at least we've got a record that the damn thing existed, and that's the compromise we reached. So it can be very challenging. I agree, it is of course possible for a guy to go to a ironmonger's and get 2 locks, and he only actually needs 1. The way the control is at the store. So when the thing comes through and the locksmith says they've supplied 2 locks to Billy, the storeman will go, why did Billy need 2 locks? Perhaps he had 2 jobs, or perhaps one's still on the van, so that the next job he does, it's on the van, and he doesn't need to go to the ironmongers and get a job. So there's an element of flexibility in the operational side of this. Now, whether we've got a real problem from petty theft and these sorts of things, I do not know. I would be, keen to find out more about it, but how do you do this? You could take individual work orders and track them back and actually go and look at the lock as it's physically installed, or look at the system as it's physically installed, and so on. But at the end of the day, there seems to be an imperative to have operational efficiency. So the repair guys doing the work and so on, have got access to the stuff they need. They go out and do the job. They sign it off. The job is recorded. It comes back. It's got a costing on it. So did we spend £1 million repairing a toilet in somebody's house or not? Stuff like that would stick out like a sore thumb. But at a very, very low level, yes, I can't guarantee that somebody isn't taking 2 screws home, or indeed a lock or something like that. I don't know how you stop it. If you've got ideas, please talk to me, and I'd be very happy to hear them. But you can't screw this down to make it absolutely perfect.
I think that's an interesting subject. I think the pipes is a standard practice, that type of thing, because if you've got to say a job's got 6 pipes, you'd order 7 because you always get breakages, cuts, and so on and so forth. So you quite often end up with surplus materials, which is then stored, and that is with any standard type of project. But I think it's very interesting in regards to maybe a scrutiny review later on, looking in depth into that, because I think there is quick, easy wins in regards to accountability. How we manager. And if you've got to build a house at X amount of square metres, or any type of building, you can pretty much, a quantity surveyor will put all the material costs very simply what you should use with a contingency. So it's quite I think it's quite a simple process, whether we're actually using that process. That's why I refer to a review, because I wouldn't actually know, because I don't know the internal process within the council to that level. But maybe you don't know it as well, Kevin. But I think it'd be a really interesting subject to get into, if nothing else, I think. Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wondered what you thought as an auditor, because we're coming back again to document handling here, and something that was brought up by Willie earlier about computers being wiped. But to find, when you're looking for a sample of invoices, that 5 out of 45 were missing, that's 11%. So if you spread that across the piece, it's beginning to look like we've got a bit of a problem here. And also the fact that some invoices had completely disappeared off the system, so we're coming again back to security of our documents and what we do with it. If you go equally, and if you go further into the thing, you've got there seems to be a kind of laissez-faire attitude to things like delivery notes, which is coming back to the thing that was raised by Graham earlier on. People putting them in a box and all these sort of things. So our documentation procedures are a bit grim. We come to the payments, and we're achieving 92% in 30 days, which our target's 94, so we're getting there. And you notice that it's basically just 3 of the systems that are really causing the problem, because everything else is well ahead of it. And we seem to have a system where we need to, I think the target's to get down to 20% where people are making manual adjustments. And manual adjustments is where you're always going to find problems. The system, it needs to work. It's almost worse than having a completely manual system, having a semi-automated system, because you've got double work with that. So I think really we need to be getting a serious grip on the document handling, which, to be fair, you have mentioned in your report, but this is something that just keeps coming up time and time again with the 30 days payment. It comes through EEI committee reports. It's coming all the time, and we're just not quite getting over the line. So hopefully we'll see some improvement and a move on to the total PCOS system, or the P2P system, or whatever you guys want to call it. But the way things work in the real and modern world.
No, thanks very much for that contribution, Malcolm. I do believe that a procurement commission and committee would be great to have, as a council would have full authority over it, and I would advocate that every opportunity, and hopefully get to that point at some point in the future. And I think that would answer all the questions when it comes to this type of scrutiny. Anybody else got any other points you'd like to raise? No. Next point is the main financial systems 2016-17 or follow-ups in regards to that. Okay. Don't see any hands getting raised at this moment in time. Any particular points anybody's wanting to raise? So yeah, certainly with quite a number of us weren't on this committee either, so we'll leave it at that then. Unless you've got any particular points you want to. No, it's in the past. Thanks very much for everybody's contribution, and Kevin, thanks very much for your contribution there. So Claire, just a wee check that you've managed to capture the bulk, and we'll maybe pick up with that out with the committee just in how we'll take that forward, just a reassurance with that.
Thank you. Yes, Chair. Certainly taken plenty of notes. Obviously, in particular, recorded the fact that you want the PEF report back in September next year. And you obviously raised a couple of points that may be brought up further on the agenda for scrutiny.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Claire. Item number 5, a follow-up internal reports between June and December last year. This report allows the committee to satisfy itself that control issues identified by internal audit have been appropriately addressed by management. The report is presented approximately every 6 months, we're being told here. Kevin, have you got anything you want to say in regards to this? You're welcome to. Yeah. Oh, that's right, some of us. I'll tell. I certainly got some comments before we came in. The lateness, there was a criticism in regards to that. No directed just to the fact that it was late. I don't know if we fully got the chance to pick up on all the points we would like to have, Ken, with the normal timeline we'd have. But certainly, again, this is open to members. Unless you've got anything to add, Kevin, in regards to that, we'll take on board. You have raised that, but we certainly discussed it before we came into the meeting. A number of members hadn't had the opportunity to answer because of time constraints and such like. First one we're looking at there is the National Fraud Initiative. Have you got any particular points they want to bring up in regards to that? I think there was previously, the one thing I would like to maybe pick up under agenda management, we could even do it here today as a committee, but we had a session with Ricky Hutton, didn't we? He came down. I think we've been a fresh group of committee members. We'd like that to be done again. Round about national fraud and a fraud within the rule. I think it's a point that interests the bulk of the members when talking to them. and in particular to get a better understanding, because again, as you go through that, we can compare ourselves to other local authorities. I think the Edinburgh case was mentioned particularly. Ricky went on about it at the time. There wasn't many members there. That was unfortunate a bit about. Don't know if that was because it was that previous time he came down. Don't know if that's because it wasn't publicised well enough, or there just wasn't a lack of enthusiasm in regards to that. But I mean, I think especially for this committee, maybe as many fresh members, I would like to see that. Ricky to be invited back down at some point in the nearer future rather than the later future. Rona?
Just to add as well that a report will be coming to Policy and Resources in June with an anti-fraud policy that Kevin and his team are preparing at the moment. So that'll be coming to P&R in June, which I think is an important step forward.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we'll look at substandard accommodation. Some people are well versed in this already. Nope, no points in regards to that, Patsy?
I just marked in this the planned work is monitoring it. You know, talking about introducing a suite of leaflets. Is that really the way forward nowadays? I'm not sure it is, and I don't know whether it's effective or not. You know, information available to tenants about raising concerns has not been updated. I mean, do we just get this report and then we just say, well, all's well and off we go, or do we get it back again, or and who's monitoring it?
Sorry, Chair, perhaps a brief introduction would have been appropriate then. So this is the first time you've seen this feedback report or this follow-up report in this style. Previously we used to use ticks and crosses, which became overbearing. So this time I've gone for a more narrative style, where I summarise the report and then we put what management said at the time, followed by what management are now saying, and then our observations on that. And our observation on this report is that you can close the report based on the progress being made. Generally speaking, in terms of substandard accommodation, there is not, at risk of being shouted down, I hope I won't be, there is not generally a shortage of reasonably good standard accommodation within this region. People can avail themselves of that. It's not like an inner city area where, you know, there are enormous pressures and some of what's on offer is extremely poor. So it's not perceived to be a significant problem. There is a small problem, potentially, but it's not perceived to be a significant problem. So the approach taken by the council, which I think in fairness is a reasonable approach, which is to rely on tenants drawing attention to accommodation which may be substandard, might not meet the required minimum standard. And therefore, you know, if that's the council's strategy, which I think is not unreasonable, then actually we need a fairly effective mechanism for telling people, tenants and so on, that actually they have these rights and entitlements. So that it might not sound very exciting to say a new suite of leaflets needs to be produced and has been, but that, you know, that fits together with that policy. If we say we'll rely on people telling us about a problem, but then we don't actually tell them how to tell us about the problem or give them information about their rights and entitlements, then it's a failed process. So this is really just closing that loop and saying it's, you know, it's now been done. They've completed that. They hadn't updated at the time we wrote the audit report. They hadn't updated those leaflets for a couple of years, so that's now been taken care of. And in terms of keeping the report open, our advice to you that running on this report is to say, you know, we do provide comments for you, but if there's any report you have a concern about, either the management actions that have been taken up or you disagree with any proposal we might make to close it, you can recall it, and in effect it would come back in the next monitoring report in 6 months' time. So if you wanted to see more, you can ask for a report to come back again. But in this particular case, there's nothing more to be done. I think that the work's closed, and as far as the original audit is concerned, we've discharged that obligation.
No, thanks, Kevin. This one reminded me of a case I had very recently, where a dwelling was absolutely, it was a private rented sector, but it was absolutely fit for purpose, so on and so forth, and it was a single parent mother who had a 5-year-old son, and they put 2 months before the end of her term, she was leaving the property, and it was a farmer, and it was fed from a biomass, which you can understand, so a nice, warm, lovely, cosy house, and it was the time of the snow, and really cold, and because there was a bit of a dispute on a Saturday, he just turned the heating off. And it's I understood at that point, have a follow-up and so on and so forth. The emergency planning team were in place in the bunker, so how do you react to something like that? And it is actually a criminal offence, and I didn't realise, I found out through that process. So, I mean, this certainly wouldn't pick up on that, but that's what it reminded me of, all the different cases that you come across and how discompassionate or somebody can actually be in that circumstance. But no, I mean, I suppose I was content with this report and closing it, but that was just a variance added to the side that how things can change in an instance. And the bit for me was actually the follow-up in regards to the person, the landlord, and the consequences thereafter, the sanctions that could have or should have been applied. I think was what really stood strong in my mind. But anyway, that was just something that happened. You get all the different cases, Willie.
Yeah, Chair, you give an example of the heating and so forth, and how climate can change and so forth. But I had a recent one as well, and I know Kevin's saying to close, but it's this joint up working between the various departments and agencies, because there's reference to external agencies there as well, in health visitors and so forth for the NHS. And if Kevin can give the assurance that he's satisfied, because I had a case only a week ago where a person presented themselves on an issue of rent arrears, but the real issue was, the standard of the house, and there didn't seem to be the joined up working that Kevin refers to. It might be covered under the light touch, but if you're living in a damp, cold condition of property, even being registered, then there is an issue there for me, because we don't hear unless a person presents himself at the surgery or whatever, seeking assistance. So I take Kevin's point that the strategies in place, it's how effective and how you measure that against the number of people that don't know I can go to the authority and ask for properties to be inspected as below tolerable standards.
Yes, Chair, and as part of that, I mean, it wasn't just about making leaflets available to tenants, it was also about joint working. So when you do have health visitors and so on, what do they do? Do they know where to go to report issues or concerns? Do they, have they got that information? So again, a sort of documentation is being developed where advice will be given and be made available. And part of the problem is not everybody will read that advice, not everybody will be aware of their responsibilities. Some people just focus on their job and that's that. But as much as possible, we want to try and let people know that there is a tolerable standard, and if the accommodation they're living in is below that. But but say it's not perceived to be a big problem in the region because people have choice. That there are alternatives, and nobody really should be living in appalling circumstances. It's really something as a community as well as society we should try and address. Fortunately, in Dumfries and Galloway, it's not as severe a problem as in perhaps some urban areas where people don't have a lot of choice.
Thank you. Other points in that? The next one is the homelessness service overview. Any comments first, Kevin, just in case in regards to this? No. Any members got any particular points they want to raise in regards to the homelessness overview? It's regular and social work. Nope. Take that as a note. So, payment cards for personal budgets. Anyways, anybody got any? Kevin, you got any points you want to raise with regards to this?
With this one, Chair, perhaps it sticks out slightly more because what we said in our internal audit comments is that members may wish to consider if a follow-up audit is required following a transfer of personal budget administration to locality offices. This was actually the second audit we'd done of this subject area, personal budgets. What had happened originally was we found some issues. We found that going back some years, we'd found that the scheme wasn't quite in compliance with expectations. Part of the solution then that was being proposed was we'll move to personal cards for people with personal budgets. And this was a follow-up audit to that. And, we still felt we had some issues associated with that. And I'm not entirely confident that we finally sort of got to a good place yet on personal budgets. There has been a transfer of the administration to locality offices, but we didn't get a good and positive and strong response from the service involved. So it's just, in terms of, yes, we've dealt with all these historic issues now around closing of bank accounts and arrangements for checking balances on personal cards and these sorts of things. We still get one or two reports of anomalies or unusual things. It is a challenging area to deal with. If somebody is asked for a personal budget and asked to take control of their finances, we should respect that, and the level of intrusion, therefore, needs to be contained. But on the other hand, there are significant sums of money in some cases, and it is concerning that having identified a personal budget for somebody and it being paid to them on a regular basis, they do actually purchase the care that they're supposed to be, receiving on the basis of that assessment. Personal budgets do provide some flexibility for people, which is why they go for them. It's a welcome in some cases, flexibility. But equally, there's opportunities for abuse or misdirection of funds and these sorts of things. So payment cards allow that to be monitored slightly better, but the advice in this report was saying we haven't quite got that right, it's not there yet. And I'm not quite convinced that we've taped this down yet. But there isn't time in the plan for it. I haven't set aside time in the plan for this. It's just a question for members. It's perhaps something that we could leave a year and then consider putting back in the plan for 2019.
Thanks for that, Kevin. I think the language I used last time was cash cow for some, because I'd seen that actually evidenced it myself with some constituents. Anybody else got any particular questions? Because I think it's the right self-directed support. I think it's the right direction. This type of, if you get this, not overly bureaucratic, is the right thing to be doing, but it's getting it right, like you say, isn't it? Make sure the measures in place. Are you wanting in, Jane? No. All right. No, just having them right measures in place. Anybody else want any comments in regards to this? No. But Malcolm, where do you want to come in? Go on, Malcolm.
No, it's just a wee quick question, really, just to put a bit of perspective on it. Exactly how much money is this that we're talking about with these personal care plans?
I'm sorry, Chair, I don't have that figure. I can't say. In terms of individual budgets, you can't be talking about largish sums of money. You're talking about 40,000-50,000 pounds. But I can't give you a budget for the total amount. It is shifting as more people want personal budgets. The money is moving across, so it's part of the overall care provision for adults and so on. But I can get that figure if you'd like it, Chair, and I'll pass it to the member.
You with that, Malcolm? Would you like to see that figure?
Yeah, it's just to get a bit, and like I say, to get a bit of perspective on it and see how big a potential problem we may have. And I mean, you do get a bit worried, because everybody probably hears of people who other family members take advantage, and I think it's something that we actually should be continuing to look at from that point of view. We're talking by the very nature of it, with the vulnerable people here who could be extorted, abused, or whatever term you want to use.
Cash cow. Say, like Kevin's already said, that do we wish to consider to follow this up, and it's contained within the report. I think your reference maybe in a year's time, Kevin, was that right? So, we'd like to see that. Take it, yep. Take it as a yes. Willie, yep.
Yeah, Chair, I hear you talk about cash cow, but it's also about the person who's receiving SDS, that they're getting the fullest of information when they're working with their own budgets, when they may be employing people, and the full complexity of that is being explained at the beginning. So I don't see it entirely as a cash cow. There's one part here. We found a case in the sample, in our sample, where disallowed expenditure. Then it's this whole issue of what's allowed and what's disallowed that we need to examine as well against it, because we're putting vulnerable people in a position of becoming employers without giving the full detail of what could and should be there, because it's references to Spain, and Spain taking on that responsibility. It's a huge issue, because we're giving people over a sum of money, and then they're not 100% sure of their responsibilities, liabilities, and so forth and so on. So it's one of, give people the right to control, but the other is then recognise the responsibilities and liabilities. So it's not just one that's abusing the system may not be clear to them. So I think we need to examine the complexity of this report and how it impacts on people who they themselves may be vulnerable. So it's how do we do that within the audit to make sure that people know what they're taking on?
Yes, Chair, it is complex. In that particular case, the expenditure involved was for painting and decorating. Now, as a normal person, I'd kind of go, I don't really see why incurring costs connected with painting and decorating can be booked against a care package. I don't understand that. But I didn't make that choice. It was reported to us. We said, can you give us examples of where you've identified disallowed expenditure and what you've done to address that? And as part of that, they gave us those figures. They said, look, here we've identified money's been spent on painting and decorating through the purchase card. It allowed us to say, okay. So, okay, there was an expectation that that would then be followed up. When it was followed up, the social worker in the end was persuaded and accepted that it did relate to the care package. I personally am not clear how that could be, but you're absolutely right. That's the dimension, the diversity associated with this. But you think about it, that was one transaction on one person's payment card for that month, and there was quite an overhead involved in following that up, discussing it, getting social worker to look at it and so on. That's the problem. At the end of the day, the person in receipt of the personal budget wishes to control their own expenditure and indeed, in some cases, can use it perhaps more effectively than the council can through its bureaucracy. So that's the flexibility that people want. They want that. But equally, there are temptations, there must be temptations, to use it very flexibly, shall we say. And there is a kind of line between, okay, we're not just giving you this money because you're vulnerable and you can spend it how you like. It is associated with a support package, a care package that you need and has been assessed as so. And if you don't need it, then why are we giving you the money? It's a whole load of questions to ask around this area. Very complex area, a lot to do with social policy, financial policy, these sorts of things. It's quite tricky, I think. It's not one that I pretend that I've got a grip on by any means. So as auditors, we're kind of going, is there a system in place? Are you doing monitoring on it? Are you reacting to the information that you're getting? You know, are you getting sufficient information? How are you meeting the challenge of dealing with some of these things? It's pretty tricky. So you know, we're just looking for a level of reasonableness. And I'm not sure, as I say, we've got there yet in relation to this.
Thanks for that, Kevin. Capital Project Review Langham Primary School. Any particular points to want to bring up in regards to that? I see it's been recommended that we close this after this. You in agreement with that? No, go on, Jane.
It seems to me that we didn't quite fulfil our remit earlier on. I mean, I like the way that this is laid out, so you can see what happened at the first bite, and then you can see what's been happening in the second bite. We haven't had a response from Education Services about whether SIPL considered whether the final project met its objectives, value for money is achieved, and the choice of a conjoined school was a sustainable solution. And I suppose we could argue that a couple of those questions maybe were passed. But nevertheless, I suppose I would be asking myself, how did project and program management standards contribute to this? And is there anything that we should, in fact, be going back to deal with now, bearing in mind we haven't had anything? Does the committee, would SIPL get a list of questions to help it ask itself these questions when it receives the information? Is the committee helped to do its job properly?
At the risk of being controversial, Chair, I was quite disappointed by the committee's reaction to this paper, which I thought was important, and it deserved a lot more attention than it received. The difficulty with it, there are two difficulties, should we say. Context is everything. So we currently have an inquiry going on in DG1, which members are due to receive shortly. There's a lot of expectation that will tell us a great deal about the way that we've been operating. It's in relation to a specific project that has specific issues, but nevertheless there's a story in there, and I think members are, dare I say, eager to receive that report and to analyse it and deal with it. So to some extent, this plays second fiddle to that. The second problem with this is the longevity of this project. The school was opened in 2014, but it dates way, way back when project and program management principles were just a twinkle in somebody's eye. So no, they didn't apply to this project. And to some extent that, hey, is that why some of these problems emerged? But within the Langham primary school project, there's a very interesting story in my view. And yes, it's historic. Yes, we can say we don't do things the way now that we did then. But there are still some issues which I thought were worthy of pulling out, and I presented to the committee in terms of saying the thing I referred to earlier. You have got a set of protocols as members for reporting of overrun capital projects. This project was reported twice through those mechanisms. The mechanism changed slightly, but the project, and actually the effectiveness of that scrutiny was terrible. It did not establish what the causes of the problems were associated with that, and yet it was before members twice, as a problem project. So the conclusion has to be the mechanism that you've got and that you've been using to look at overrun capital projects doesn't work, hasn't worked. Members were not effective. The old system where we had a corporate pot of development money doesn't exist now, but when this project was running, there was a corporate pot of development money available. This project got 50% of what was available in a single year, in a year in which there was huge pressure on that. And it got that money because it was well supported by members appropriately. But with it came strings, and the strings that came with it were from Policy and Resources Committee that the Education Committee should scrutinise that project carefully, and the Education Committee, in my opinion, did not do that. It did not discharge that responsibility. And you have a question about the actual school itself. The school is smaller than it was budgeted for, and there were add-ons put on the project at the end of the process, which had already been provided for in the project, but they were topped up, and nobody is questioning that. And that is a surprise to me, but perhaps there's an acceptance by members that, that was then, this is now. So I don't know why this committee didn't react to this report. I was a bit surprised. So maybe we just have to move on from it and just say, okay, historically it's interesting. That's about as far as we can go. We've got other things coming up. We've got other opportunities to deal with some of these issues. So I can't say what's in your mind, Chair.
I mean, I really do thank you for that level of honesty. I think it'll be well received with the committee, and I do think DG1, we've got the reviews in item number 9. There's one of them's a school one I want to bring up, which might be similar to this, very much so. And I mentioned it previously, about 18 months ago, when I was a member of the previous committee. So I think we probably have got an eye on it, but maybe you could be absolutely right. We'll just tease out for what will be said now in regards to maybe we need to keep our eye focused on this, and that's interrogated a little bit further. Jane, then I've got three.
Could I just say, follow up on that? Well, arguably then there is a little piece of work for us to do to check whether we're able to ask the proper questions in committee, whether we've got the information in front of us. Now, it might well be there are plenty of questions to ask ourselves and we just shut our eyes to it. I don't know.
I think one of the biggest, most important, but I've seen many occasions throughout this, it's my third term as a council, that we don't actually apply our protocols, and we don't stick to them, and it just disappears into ether and it's gone, and decisions are made, and it's how we follow them up, the processes, without being overly bureaucratic, but in some instances it's very, very important, and it allows fraud and so on and so forth to happen and manifest. But anyways, without going down that route, I think we'll cover that, come at a different point. I'll take you the way I've seen you, so I'll give you first, Patsy, then Matthew, then Malcolm.
Thank you. Just on the previous slide, we had I think it was Brown Hall Primary School. Did that come after this, or because it smacked of the same kind of thing, that just life went on its own without anybody checking up on what was happening? Things were made bigger or added on or not come back to committee, and nobody bothered about it. I mean, it seems to be within, that's 2 schools that this has happened, and I just wonder if we can't send a stronger message to SIPL somehow from this committee, because that's what we're here to do. This is a very damning, shocking report. There's so much wrong with this project. Everything, yes. and we're just going to put it down to experience. I'm not terribly sure that sits very well on my shoulders, if I'm being honest.
I hope that's what we pick up for ourselves. So we probably won't in Patsy, but I think we need the collateral evidence to absolutely go forward in the way we maybe should. You got any response to that, Kevin? And it's Matthew and Malcolm.
Well, you know, arguing against myself now, you may need to put this down. As I say, the historical context for this, change, new approaches, you know, I don't want to start a rammy on something that you know, that takes us nowhere. I'm not out for just causing trouble. As I say, I tried to, as part of this report, this report cost us dear to do this report. Huge amount of work went into it, huge amount of sweat and effort and so on. And that's when I was quite disappointed when we brought it to you in November or December, and the committee was, you know, completely flat on it. The message I was getting was you want to move on from it. So I put that to you. I think you want to move on from this report. And that's hence the comment at the very bottom, which is, if you're minded, just close it. I'm not sure what you can do with it, other than bear in mind the general concerns which I've raised. Now, the circumstances have changed, things are different, the way that we fund things is slightly different. The amount of money that's available to the council to invest is limited. We've got project and program management principles. Most people will tell you this would never happen again. I'm not quite persuaded of that, and in particular the issues that I brought forward, which is to say you built a school that is smaller, but you spend all of the £5 million budget that you got, and you topped it up as well. Did you get value for money? What is the cost per square metre of construction of that building? And nobody can tell me. So I can't even say to you it was the same cost as Brownhill or any other school. I've no idea. You know, it's a very attractive school. It's very nice. It was built on the side of a leisure centre, which is built on the side of an academy school that is showing its age. So again, in terms of, is this the right outcome? Would we have been better to build, perhaps controversially saying this, an all-through school at that location? But you know, it was, I think, under consideration at one stage, but it wasn't concluded. The secondary school is over capacity. It's too big for the number of pupils at it. So we've tacked a nice, really good primary school onto the side of a building for a school that's got problems and issues with it, I think, in terms of size, capacity, and so on. So was it the right solution? How much work did we do? But, you know, because this is rooted back in 2005 and it had become a bit of a thing, you know, just getting the damn school finished and built and so on. That's ultimately, I think, why we wound up where we did, is because the options we could have taken way back when, the proper analysis and so on, were not taken, and we wound up with this. It's a good school. It's well regarded in terms of the people that use the building. A little bit neat, maybe, in terms of sizing. There's not a lot of elbow room in there. But, you know, it's a very attractive school. I commend it to you. Go and have a look at it. It's worth doing. But in terms of a project, analysing a project, learning lessons from it, there may be very little to take out of it now because of the timescale and because of other things that are going on. So I have to put it to you, Chair. I think you might need to let this drop, notwithstanding my disappointment that the committee didn't react to it in the way I thought it could.
No, we'll certainly take that on board, but I think ultimately there's so much more that I think will bring this into light, and it's more up to date, I think, as we go forward. We've got Matthew, then Malcolm, then Willie.
We could let it drop if we knew for a fact that it would never happen again. And in your opinion, if we were going to deliver a project like this, could it happen again? And I have another question after you've answered that.
Well, we have other things in place and new things in place. I couldn't guarantee it would never happen again. I do question, one of the things in the report it said was to make sure, with capital resources as tight as they are, we have to be absolutely sure that we are only applying them to prioritised things. We don't just get something because we want it or because we fancy it. It has to have some kind of ranked priority. There was even a process in place at the time this project was developed for prioritising things, yet nevertheless we flung nearly £1 million at the project at the end of towards the end of its conclusion on things which, you know, I don't know, is a 3G pitch essential in Langham in comparison with other locations? Everybody wanted one. Members were very keen to see them coming into their communities. You know, you guys put pressure on the department here as well. I want a 3G pitch for my community. But is it a priority against other things? And the expanded kitchen that took place, you know, there's some co-responsibility.
I think, though, I mean, I think your toe's probably just dipping into politics now, I think, Kevin, at that point. So
I'm sorry, Chair, but, you know,
we understand. We understand, but I think just reflecting back myself, decisions were made, discussions were had, I think you're probably just touching into politics now.
Yes, I do apologise, Chair, and I apologise to the committee as well. It's not my remit, but, you know, as a general point, members also have, you know, things they want to see done correctly. That's your job. That's what you're there to do. So I wouldn't be criticising you for pursuing political agendas. But you know, nevertheless, as a project, as a story, it's a very interesting one, but it may just now be an historical story. That's all we have to do.
Maybe at a point in time, but I think we'll still get to the same end result. Matthew, what back in?
I don't mind a little bit of stick for politics because we should be held responsible for our decisions that we make. However, if we have a team in place to deliver a project, then it should be pretty much on time, on budget, and the size of the building that you wanted in the first place. However, I'd just like it on the record that council-wide, we seem to be doing everything back to front when it comes to purchase orders and the way that we procure things, the disasters that are things like DG1 and school delivery. And then, of course, we have this in here and this catalogue of other issues identified. It's the building itself, the time it took, and the cost. That's the three main points of a building project. And so we're not getting any of them right. And if we're not getting any of them right, then we need to throw this system in the bin and start afresh with a new one. And whether that, I say it all the time and it's controversial, but if that means that you hand that over to a private company to deliver for you, and we actually scrutinise them instead of just let them run off with the project and deliver a pup like DG1, then we have to do it. But what have we learned from this? And are we going to do it? I just keep coming back to it. Are we going to do it again?
I think that's the point, I think, and that's why I think we should choose the scrutiny review rather than the audit trail. In that way, Kevin will keep it, Rowan will keep us, our officials will keep us right in regards to that. We take control of it at that point. We will do the review, the members, and I think that's what has to happen. We can ask the question we want to ask, and then we will make a recommendation to full council. So the very point you're bringing up, full council, we think we've got our processes wrong in the past. This is where we think the improvements are and what we should do. And not 9 times out of 10, full council accept and adopt those recommendations. So I think we're heading in the right direction. How do we get there? I think it's really good that Kevin's highlighting this level of potential, what was going on in regards to this particular issue. And it's not a one-off. I've seen it many times through my construction eyes within the council, and that's gone back to sober look at Stranraer waterfront. We'll get to that position. We'll look at Annan, we'll look at a primary school further in the east of the region as well, funnily enough. I think if we get to that point, and we'll start to uncover 2 or 3 of these things, exactly what I think was being alluded to within this report, without having to come back, it maybe isn't a point in time, but fresher stuff and stuff that maybe members are actually more aware of at a more ward or personal level. So I think we can interrogate to a higher level through a scrutiny review. Malcolm, then Willie.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, when I started reading this, I just thought this is DG1's mini-me. And we're going through all the things in here about the oversight remit, and it actually makes me, I'm maybe a wee bit cynical at times. I'll apologise for my cynicism, but the fact that was information kept from members? You're saying that members didn't authorise the additional expenditure, were they being kept abreast of everything that was going on? I've written here that the whole thing just sounds familiar. I think your benchmarking and cost per square metre would be a very important statistic to have so we can monitor it, because not only was it a smaller building, it's 22% over budget, or 21.8% if you want to be completely accurate. But it raises another. This is a doubt I've been having about. You say things are happening differently now than they were then, and we seem to be managing to bring buildings in on time and under budget. And this is where my cynicism comes out. Is that because we're being more lax with the budgets and more lax with the amount of time that we're allowing? You know, is our framework strict enough? Or are we just actually giving ourselves easier targets to hit? Which is why I think maybe having a wee bit of a look into this would actually be a good idea.
You get any points? No. Wally?
Yeah, Chair, I think the important thing is, you know, and while it's focusing on Langham, it's the paragraph we recommend that the Policy and Resources Committee consider whether service committees are receiving enough information to enable them to oversee project adequately, whether the Council scrutiny process for overtime covered projects effectively, and whether project management arrangements are adequately ensure projects don't continue indefinitely without reappraisal. We considered an earlier report under item 4 in terms of project boards, standards to be met. If one that didn't meet the standard, it's Langham. And then we can go on from Langham to mention however many you want to mention. And yet, you know, we're in early stages of standards and meeting these standards and so forth. Because, you know, I think, again, Kevin's to be commended for his candidness, you know, and he may have overstepped the mark, in your opinion, in terms of straying into the politics. But equally, in terms of the reports and governance, where I don't know how many times I've asked at committees that there's inadequate report information in the report to consider, then it's just, you know, how did it get through the process of governance to scrutinising reports before they come to members? Because that's the role of the officers before it reaches the politician, the elected member. So there's a whole lot of issues here relating back to item 4 in terms of lessons that have to be learned. So there isn't a second DG1, there isn't a second waterfront, there isn't a second whatever else you want to mention here. So while it's right to report the Langham situation, it's what lessons we learn as an audit committee, audit with the added that you're not only audit, but your scrutiny as well. Notwithstanding what Jane said in terms of, are we asking the right questions? And Kevin's reference to the criticism he made of the Education Committee. Are we asking the right questions? And each committee, as I have always been told, has got its own scrutiny performance, that it should be scrutinising these reports. You know, so I think that we've got to relate it back to item 4, if the lessons have to be learned, and that we sharpen up on terms of the project boards, making officers, or at least officers accountable to the administration, and we make the administration accountable to audit and risk.
Thank you. Thanks, Billy, for that contribution. So, well, the only thing... sorry, Ronnie. Sorry, Ronnie's coming in.
Apologies, if I just might say a few words, maybe in a bit more upbeat way. I mean, the project management arrangements that we now have, when you compare to when we're looking back at these projects, are you know completely different. And you know, the Langham Primary School project did start around the same time as DG1, so we're in a different time frame. What I would add to the debate, I think, is that the way that we're going to build in the future and procure buildings and commission them is not going to be this way. You know, we've already seen that with the way we've done the bridge, and we've done Dalbeattie School, we're doing the refurbishment at St Joe's. These are all managed in a completely funded in a different way, managed in a different way, and that's likely to be how we're going to do things in the future. So I wonder if actually what would be more worthwhile would be to look at some of the recent projects that are going to be the way we're going to buy things in the future, and make sure that that method is fit for purpose, and that members are involved enough in that, and that they understand their scrutiny role in that, rather than go back to a previous method. You know, it's the recent method of building and procuring buildings that I think would be used to us going forward. And I'm sure there will be recommendations coming forward in the DG1 report that will point us as to what the good ways of doing that in the future are.
I'm pleased to hear what Rona says. It's about moving forward, looking forward. But it's not just about the procurement of buildings, because in this report, it refers to officers that exceeded delegation limits. It's about receiving the fullest or adequate information to allow members to take informed decisions and educated decisions. So it's not just about the procurement. It's about what information is given to members at a given time, any given time. So, you know, and I welcome what Rona's saying, because it was needed, you know, for to scrutinise and not just navel gaze. It's about, you know, how do we look at each of the projects in moving forward, and what information we require as members, not just on purchasing, but on many of the other aspects. And I'm pleased to hear Rona saying it, but we need to see the report that says this is how we're going to do something different, that would make us confident that we can, as elected members, look at that and take proper decisions.
Like I said earlier, well, I've seen it time and time again, the protocols are being breached, and so getting back to the recommendation that's there, I mean, do we actually want to see this closed at this moment in time, or do we want to leave it open until such time as we would like to revisit?
I don't know if there's any purpose in going over and over and over Langham. I think what is important is what lessons have been learned and how we come forward with a report that Rona has just orally given us that says this is how we are going to improve. This is the process that's in place. Bearing in mind we've got an item 4 that talks about it being in the early stages. Well, if it's at the early stages, where is it in terms of early stage? Just to what Rona said. That's the report we need, so that each of the projects can be examined against that report.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if you've got any. My view is that we take it forward to the scrutiny review, and we'll tease everything up at that point, and that we'll get to that item number 9. So we'll move on from here. Yep, I know. Yep. Leader programme 2016-17. Emily, got any points in regards to that we'd like to pick up on? Get anything to add to it? No. No long. 2021, I think it's referred to in there. It's about the same time as it comes to an end. Shopfront improvement initiatives. Does anybody want any particular points in regards to this? I mean, I know I did previously a lot of work through I think it was the previous Scrutiny Committee. Patsy?
I'm just wondering, is there an amount of money being allocated, £1 million that they're here on the radio or something, for town centre regeneration with the budget? Sorry? Living fund thing. I just wonder if, you know, there seems to be a problem with this fund, that there hasn't been the staff to administer it and to monitor it. So we've relied on a temporary surveyor who's done a good job, apparently. I just wondered, going forward with the town centre ones, who's, you know, if we've, just for shop fronts, if we've found a problem identifying staff to deal with the applications, how are we going to do the other thing? That was all. Just a question.
Kevin?
I'm sorry, Chair, I don't have a lot to say. Can't advise you a lot on it. The shop front, remember, was a member initiative specific, and we felt that you would likely want to know what had happened there, get some assurances around it. You know, bear in mind, we've had a recent appointment, new head of economic regeneration. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of pressure on that department. Obviously, this is one of the council's core objectives, is to try and improve the local economy. So I would think so. I think this report was quite useful to the new head of economic regeneration in terms of giving her a view of something that had happened, and it allows her to form policies and ideas and work out where to provide support and things. So as far as I know, it's okay, but if members want to tell me differently, in which case we'll look at it in terms of prospects for an audit.
I just remember being a member of the administration, and we discussed this. It was put forward a proposal, and we bought into it, but its delivery was completely, felt it was unacceptable actually as it went forward. Its slowness, and you pointed this stuff out, but I mean, it's been exhausted for me as far as I'm concerned. Does anybody else have a different view? We'll agree that it's nearly complete. Members can close the report. Thank you. Yeah, okay, Outturn against the 17-18 internal audit plan and controls assurance event. I've nothing else about the recommendations, double check, I was about the recommendations, sorry about that. So, we've been asked to note and comment on the progress made by the management in addressing internal audit reports as detailed in the appendix. I think we've done that. We've been through that process. And two, to decide if any internal audit reports are to be included in the next follow-up report to the committee in September. I think we've probably done that as we went through, but what have you captured, Claire?
Losing track of where I am in my notes. There's the follow-up on the payment cards for personal budgets, but that wouldn't be till 2019. And there was obviously mention of the scrutiny report on item 9 as well.
Are we content with that? I think I'll pick that one up out with as well. Took a few notes myself, but I'll pick that one up just to make sure that for the sake of the minute we've got that absolutely accurate. Okay. Item number 6. We'll get this turned round. Outturn against the 2017-18 internal audit plan and controls assurance statement. Internal audit team operates to a plan agreed at the beginning of each financial year. 17-18 was approved with Audit and Risk Management Committee at its meeting on 23rd of June 17. This report provides information about the progress made by internal audit against the plan at the year end and the conclusions arising from that work done. Kevin, this is your report. Is there anything you want to talk to about it before we go into detail?
Very briefly, Chair. Yeah, we had a challenging year. It was a fairly stiff plan. We didn't deliver all of it. We had an issue. We lent one of our staff to the GG1 inquiry, which took a chunk out of the available time. Across the piece, actually, I think we did quite well. We couldn't undertake a main financial systems audit on council tax. So we've rolled that into the next plan, which is, I think, the next item on the agenda. We wouldn't want to drop that one. We've also rolled forward as a suggestion payment cards in schools. That's because we know that this committee has a keen interest in procurement and those sorts of issues. So we want to kind of look at how schools are using payment cards and whether they're sticking to the rules or not. That would be a bit of a challenging audit, but we think it's worth doing. We're dropping 2 altogether, which sits around, sorry, let me find them. Home care payments, real-time monitoring. This was something called real-time monitoring, which has been introduced for private sector providers of home care. It's a system that's been in use in the council for a number of years successfully, and so it was introduced, or it was due to be introduced last year. We've had a discussion with management about it. It's okay. We're not picking up any problems around it. It was imposed upon home care providers, private sector home care providers, as part of the contracts that were set up and renewed. And as far as I'm aware, there's no issues with it. It's okay. This is where home care operatives, people providing home care, in effect phone in when they arrive at somebody's home to provide the service. They phone in, and then when they leave, they phone in, and it's all electronically tracked and so on. So this hence that real-time monitoring, who is what and doing, where they're doing it is all logged on a system. But we don't see at the moment a problem with that, so we're not suggesting that to have a roll forward. And the other one we're suggesting is the Home Energy Efficiency Fund, which was an audit which we'd put in last year because it looked interesting. But there's an agency does this, and I think the councils, although the money cycles through the council, the agency seems to be pretty good and on top of things. So we had a look at that and decided it didn't justify a priority, should we say, in a constrained audit plan for 18-19, which is kind of what we got. So we're dropping 2 and rolling 2 forward. Apart from that, we pretty well delivered the plan. I think overall it's a good result, it's a good outcome. We'll have fewer what are called audit days delivered. Our percentage traditionally has been in the region of sort of 98, 99, even over 100%. We're down a bit this year, but as I say, that reflects the fact that we had a secondment. And then the controls assurance statement is a formal statement to you, which feeds into the governance statement, which I think you'll see a draft of in June. And this is saying that, in our opinion, or at least in my opinion, based on all the work that we've done, all the information we've got, there are no overwhelming concerns about internal control arrangements at the council, and that we have what's called a positive assurance for the year in question. Point out, Chair, if I may, blow our trumpet slightly, this is the earliest ever the Outturn report has been presented to the committee. The year ended on 31st of March, and here we are on the 10th of April, and I'm reporting our Outturn on that. So even if I pat myself on the back a bit, I think that's pretty good.
We'll commend you for that, Kevin. Be commended. Well done, I could say it is a good report. We've been asked to note and comment on the progress. Jane?
Could I just ask, the question about supporting a community council issue on page 26. It's a big chunk of money, that big chunk of resource. And I mean, while I think it's really important that we do apply our resource to a community council if it's got a problem, that's still a big whack of money. And is that something which we should really be concerned about? Is it something that we should take any lesson from? Or is it something that was one-off and you think it's probably not going to happen again?
Chair, and I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say this, at the risk of being slightly political, I think community councils probably absorb members, individual members, in quite a lot of time and energy. In terms of the direct cost to the council, it's not that significant. They all receive an admin grant from the council, but they can also receive other funds which are not directly council monies. That's wind farm monies and other things like that. So community councils are very important. They're not established in every community. Some communities don't have them and choose not to have them. But where they do occur, they can be, they can make many demands on the council. Very effective in trying to make sure for individual communities that things happen and occur properly, and many members are actively involved in them. In this particular case, there was a bit of an issue in terms of audit time and audit effort that went into it. You could argue, we couldn't afford to do this across every community council that exists. So we tend to deal or tend to try and assist where there are particular problems in individual community councils. I've got another one at the brew just at the moment, which unfortunately is slightly more intractable than this one. It will not be quite so straightforward to sort out. But, our job is to support members and to support the running of the council. And, if something comes up at community council, we'd never refuse to look at it, depending on the nature of it. We do feel we have a role. There is in community council constitutions a right for the council to impose what's called a financial governance audit on them if there is a concern. That's not exercised very often, but it's very useful where it's necessary to go in and try and help sort some issues out. We do have that ability to do it. So yeah, they pop up from time to time. If we get one difficulty a year, that's not bad.
There's a load of them. Any members got any other questions in regards to this report? We're being asked to note and comment on the progress in regards to 1718 as per Appendix 1, and note the internal auditor's assurance statement as per Appendix 2. And should we have a 2.3, just I think to commend and recognise the experience of the report in the timely fashion that it's come in. So if we can put that as some kind of word, and we'll have a 2.3 there. Thank you. Item number 7. Some members have got some complaints in regards to this one, because some seem to get and some never. So, internal audit strategic plan 18 to 21. This report is for members. Proposed internal audit plans. The 3-year strategic audit plan is updated. Jobs and time allocations for 2018-19 audit work are identified, and indicative provisions for the following 2 years are given. We're being asked to approve the strategic internal audit plan for 18 to 21 and the annual plan for 18-19 as per Appendix 1. Kevin, have you got anything you'd like to add to this?
My apologies first to the committee chair that it was a late item. I do apologise for that. My enthusiasm got the better of me. I thought I could get it ready for this committee, and I thought it was worth pushing at it, which meant, unfortunately, it came too late. So I apologise to the committee for that. but it gives us a good start for the year again. We're at the beginning of the new audit year. Hopefully, if members agree with this report, or if you make any amendments to the report, that's fine. But we'll have it at the beginning of the year rather than June. I thought it was worth pushing at. So in terms of what we're proposing, it is a modified plan for two reasons. The first of which is we're expecting a small reduction in the resources available to internal audit as a result of an ERVS application, which is expected to progress. So we're reducing from 4.6 FTEs to 4. That has an impact on the total available time, obviously, to do it. And the second thing is we've got 2 brought forward audits that we're keen to see. Now, in the past, it might have been possible to accommodate an aspect of brought forward work by not imposing on the plan. That's not going to be possible. So I need to provide budget time in this plan for both of the brought forward audits. So it starts to limit, therefore, our flexibility in the scope of what we can do. So it's a tough year for us. It's going to be a difficult year to deliver this. We've got a lot of things to do in that time, but I'm confident we can do it, or we can get extremely close to it. And I think all of these pieces of work are worth doing. Obviously, our priority is main financial systems work. So we've got, as I say, an extra one this year with a brought forward, and that takes a chunk of time. We will try and be very efficient indeed in the way in which we do those. We're involved in internal discussions at the moment about the scope of those audits and whether or not we need to do everything, or whether we can take some assurances from other sources on them. Departmental financial systems, as I say, we've got useful pieces of work in there, I think. And then under the risk management programme, we've got some specific risk issues that we think need to be dealt with as well. So it's a balanced programme. There's not a lot of wiggle room in it. And if members want to change it, we'll have to, if you wanted anything extra done this year or a different thing done, we'd have to drop one or other of these audits to make room for that. That's the key message. But it's deliverable, and I'm confident by this time next year, we'll be coming back to you with a positive position on it as well.
Thank you, Kevin. I did pick up that we've got a smaller resource than a lot of other councils. It's referred to, but we have got a reduction, 4.6 down to 4. But you've given us a reassurance that we've got enough staff there. You're confident in regards to its deliverability. But obviously, if members, any straightforward direct questions. A couple of points in. I just picked up on appendix number 2. I'll be very quick. Audit and risk management's mentioned where I think it should be a couple of places. Probably should be audit, risk and scrutiny committee. I think it's being relevant. And number 11, continuous improvement. The very last bullet point, Kevin, I just wondered, had we thought about any, I know with the electoral registers and such, like, we've done some conjoined working with, I think it's Scottish Borders. We talk about local parties, so I think NHS in particular. Is there a chance to actually co-production, get improvements or benefits from that? And it comes to audit, kind of similar, very similar. So I just wondered, the very last bullet point almost touches on that. And the only other quick question I've got is in regards to authority and independence, with reference to the Chief Executive, very last bullet point, the Chief Internal Auditor is free to bring any audit matter to the attention of the Chief Executive of the Council. We're going back the way I'm talking about, obviously, not in the future, but how often does that happen? It's never happened. How does that compare to other local authorities then?
Arguably, if I have to resort to bringing an audit matter to the Chief Exec's attention, it's a failure. So one would hope it never happens, and it's not been necessary. I think the governance we have in place and the relationships and my right of access, that the right of access to the Chief Exec is sort of embedded in all the professional standards that say it has to be there. But I know very few auditors who avail themselves. There are 1 or 2 local authorities where the internal audit section reports directly to the Chief Exec, and one assumes therefore that there's more dialogue and more discussion going on there. But in terms of our structure, we've not adopted that, and there's plenty of opportunity. If I have a problem, I would of course also speak to the chair, avail myself of the opportunity to speak to the chair about any concern. But across the piece, we don't have those kinds of problems, I'm pleased to say.
No, thank you. Just Langham came into mind when I read that, and some others as well. Was it potentially, but maybe speak about that offline, just in regards to, because it was something that popped into my mind. Okay, I think can we approve the strategic plan as per internal audit plan for 18-20 and the annual plan for 18-19 as per Appendix 1? Isn't that okay? Agreed. Number 8. Before the room empties, head in that direction, right? Okay. Thank you very much, Kevin. Very much appreciated. Thank you. 12:41. Okay, the purpose of this report, the Council's external auditors, which is, give John a chance to sit down. John Boyd's here. Have published a plan of work they intend to undertake for 17-18 financial year based on their analysis of the risks facing the Council. This plan highlights the audit work necessary to ensure the Council has in place sound arrangements for producing accurate financial statements, for maintaining an effective internal control environment and for managing its performance, and so on and so forth. So, we've been asked to note and comment the external audit plan for 17-18 in the appendix. But John, I'll over to you first, see if you've got any comments, anything you want to say in regards to it.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just take the report as read, but just touch briefly on some of the key aspects of the plan. Probably just working through our audit at a glance on page 34 of the pack. Our plan is prepared in accordance with international standards in auditing, as well as the Code of Audit Practice issued by Audit Scotland. One of the key areas when auditing a set of financial statements is defining materiality. So that's basically a value of the financial statements that we would consider material to stakeholders. And we've set that, or proposed setting that at 1.7% of gross expenditure. Now that's an increase in the prior year, and the reason for that is reflecting our increased knowledge and understanding of the organisation, and ultimately our comfort around the work performed by management. And that sits quite comfortably within our audit methodology in terms of our audit range, which would generally go up to as much as 2% for that. The other sort of important materiality figure for yourselves is the £250,000 figure. So that's where, as part of our audit procedures over the financial statements, if we identify any unadjusted difference, that's the value in which we will report those differences to you. That's actually predetermined by Audit Scotland, that figure. The audit of the financial statements, and in accordance with auditing standards, we take a risk-based approach. So within the plan, we've identified those areas of which we would consider significant risks. So this is areas where there's a potential for, where we've identified the potential for material misstatement. And auditing standards themselves actually identify two such areas, including revenue recognition. So that's where there's potential that your revenue streams are misstated within the accounts, and management override. And audits of any public sector body is also required to consider the risk of expenditure being incorrectly recorded, just given the nature of transactions. So we've included those risks within our annual audit plan. They're in detail. I think it's on page 37 of the pack. 40 of the audit pack. We've also identified, and those are actually common across all public sector audits. In terms of other areas of audit risk, these are outlined, particularly prevalent to the Council, these are outlined in page 41. They cover valuations, so valuations of land and buildings and valuations of pension liabilities. The reason they are a higher degree of risk in terms of our, from an audit perspective, is just around the level of judgment associated with those. So as part of our audit procedures, we'll do additional audit work around that in response to that. The other identified area in relation to audit financial statements is the recognition of WT Learning Campus. So that's reviewing the accounting treatment around the new asset as well as the funding liability recognised in the financial statements. The kind of final area I would draw the committee's attention to is in relation to our wider scope audit work. Under the Code of Audit Practice, our audit doesn't just cover expressing an opinion on the financial statements. It also requires us to report to yourselves around the wider scope aspects covering financial sustainability, financial management, governance and transparency, and value for money. And we've identified those there as part of our core audit work. The current year, the council's actually been selected as for a best value assurance review undertaken by the Controller of Audit. The best value assurance programme was changed in 2016, where every council will be covered over once over a 5-year period. And 17-18 represents the year in which the council will be covered. And that is delivered through Audit Scotland working with ourselves and ultimately culminating in a best value assurance report in due for reporting in late 2018. It touches on those areas in terms of wider scope that we've detailed in the plan. The only other sort of area we touch on is just our appendix. We've included a high-level timetable there, as well as all the audit outputs that we'll present both to yourselves and submit to Audit Scotland. Obviously, the audit culminating in expressing an opinion on the financial statements and reporting to yourselves in September. But happy to take any questions on the plan.
Thanks very much, John. Should have introduced Karen as well. Sorry about that, Karen. As the report author for the Council's report, so Karen McNish as well. John's from Grant Thornton. Malcolm, I think you had some questions on this, did you?
I read through the report, and it slightly reminds me why I stopped doing auditing. But I think it looks like it's going to be quite thorough, and you've highlighted a lot of aspects that we've had concerns about over the last few months, particularly to do with profitability of some of the trading functions and that sort of thing. You've highlighted issues with expenditure being rolled over in the other year-end problems, and I think that's quite good. I also appreciate the fact you mentioned about the fact that we're going to have to make some big cuts in years to come, and your section on sustainability, I think, is very important, especially when it comes to things like council staffing levels and how we go forward and how we make those savings. So I'm looking forward to seeing the results of all your endeavours.
Thanks very much for that, Malcolm. Patsy?
Yes, thank you. I'm just looking at page 48, which is headed up Communication of Audit Matters with those charged with governance. And then I'm looking down the list of things there, and there's 2 or 3 that ping out at me with reference to our previous conversation at committee about Langham Primary School and the issues that were identified that were not adhered to, and that seems to come under non-compliance with laws and regulations, significant deficiencies in internal control identified, and significant matters in relation to going concern. And I know whilst you won't be looking backwards, but having heard the concerns we've had with this particular project, which is we've put to bed sort of now, I hope that you will realise how important that is to us for future projects and for any projects that you are auditing or anything that you're doing throughout this time. And I hope that you will be full and frank with us with regards to this, because it's really important.
No, thanks for the comments. In terms of the scope of the audit, and in particular touching on the earlier conversation around Langham, our audit work would really focus on any non-compliance with laws or regulations in the current sort of financial year and the reporting period. However, as part of the wider scope audit work, those areas around value for money and decision-making process, they're all things that are a key focus of that work, and the best value assurance review. Obviously, we would be looking at the arrangements that are in place now, as opposed to kind of looking back at such examples. But they are very helpful in terms of focusing our work and our planned procedures.
Well, what I'm really saying is you've heard the conversation we had today about our concerns about how things were not adhered to with regards to Langham School. So what we're really wanting from you is to be well aware of that problem and to highlight anything that, should you come across it, as you're auditing various things now. I understand you can't go back, and I wouldn't expect you to, but you know how important it is for us to get those things in place and for them to work, because obviously they hadn't been working before. Thank you.
I think that's a valuable piece of advice you've just given them there, Patsy, because we have got a keen eye on it, and if we pick up on it and you didn't, John, it wouldn't look that good, would it? So it's good you're getting that advice. So we're happy to note and comment as we have on the external audit plan. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Karen. Number 9. Scope for Scrutiny Reviews 2018. The purpose of this report is to agree the scopes for the Scrutiny Review for 2018. We're being asked to review and agree the scope for the Scrutiny Review to grow the local economy through the procurement process as per Appendix 1. We're also being asked to review and agree the scope for the Scrutiny Review to improve our support to vulnerable people through improved data sharing arrangements set out in Appendix 2. And we'll probably put a 2.3 and we'll talk about 2.4 actually. So I suppose, right, okay, open it up to members, and as far as we've got 2 reviews put in front of us, and we've got a third recommendation there talking about identify 3 lead members for each review. So I suppose this is it Andy's report in particular, or is it aye? So
She was involved.
Yeah, so Andy, I suppose anything you want to add to or say to this report, you're very welcome. I mean, I'm very interested in 2.3 and where that kind of came from.
Thank you. Sorry, Jane, did you want to? Well, I've got nothing extra to add to the report. Obviously, the 2 scrutiny review scopes are there. In respect to, did anybody else want to raise up on 2.3?
No, it's myself that's saying what I'm saying. And as far as 2.3, I'm just interested in where, I thought if you were going to say a few words to it, I'm interested in where that particular recommendation come from. But if you've not got anything to say, Andy, we'll leave it at that and we'll just go straight to the questions. Just give me
questions will be fine.
Aye, okay, nothing to add. Jane, you and your hand up.
Thanks, Chairman. Now, I was just going to ask about the objectives of the scrutiny review. Would we also be thinking in Appendix 1 of trying to end up with a best practice in actually measuring what we can achieve for the economy? Because I don't know whether it would come up through this, through you, Chair Andy, whether we would emerge with a good suite of indicators, possibly to help us use the information.
Thank you. Yeah, we've obviously identified within the outcome in Appendix 1 a sort of a method of measuring, although when we were going through the process it was very hard to sort of nail that would be the specific measure. So indeed we could add within the objective a further suite to identify a suite of indicators to monitor the effectiveness of the local businesses involved in the procurement process.
Okay with that, Jane? Yeah. Yep. Any other members got any other points? It must be getting too near lunchtime, I think. And this is a very good report, I would say that. Jane, you want back in? Sorry.
If I could, on Appendix 2, I wondered, we talk about evidence sessions and workshops, research and contributors. I did wonder about, what about service receivers, patients and clients, if people had anything to offer in what they would like to make certain that is shared so that they get a better service. I don't know whether we could possibly do that through social work staff and NHS staff. And my final question, Chairman, was about being sure that we will end up with somebody who we know is in charge of this project, if you see what I mean, so that we know who to go to ask the question that's going to drive it forward.
I mean, I didn't see this as enslaving us, so to speak. I'd say as a review, but certainly if we want to add, even on as going through our workshops and that, like we absolutely can, if there's points that we'd make, but I mean, maybe just get reassurance in regards to that. Was that the intention? But I wouldn't have thought this would enslave us or had us stuck in a particular rut. We could open this up through because again, back to evidence sessions. I think that's important that we get the right people around the table, get the right level of evidence, so we fully understand. And if it isn't directly incorporated in here, we can actually say, okay, we think we need to approach this type of service user, this person, whatever it may be, this type of business person, it could be whatever. So hopefully it's not there to enslave us, it's just there to guide us. Andy.
Thank you, Chair. I would just add that as the workshops progress, we'll gather out more information, and as that goes through, so we have at the moment built-in time to liaise with practitioners and service providers. Out of that, it may well help identify people that we would want to go and get a viewpoint from their perspective. We are, in respect to data sharing, restricted by legislation, so we need to be careful about what we may get back from recommendations. Still needs to comply with legislation on that information sharing. But as we go through the workshops, we'll become a lot clearer, and we can pose more questions and get those answers by the end of the third session.
Just so I'm clear, Anne, in regards to 2.3, where does that really come from? Identify 3 lead members of each for each of the actual reviews. Rona?
It was a lesson, I think, that was learned from the last scrutiny reviews. The director said that it did help having continuity. That if 3's too many, understand you're a small group, so even 2 that would always commit to, as far as they could, to being at the different sessions, so we get some continuity through. Just gives officers a touch base that's consistent. That was why the suggestion was made.
Okay, no, I understand that. I mean, it's about having, it's like, look what's happened today, and it's 11 down to 6, and it can happen just as quick as that before you know it. You haven't got a quorum, and you come back to the next one, and some people think, well, I haven't actually had my input in regards to that. We've really had the opportunity. So we can certainly get that, discuss it. I mean, what I would like to add is what I referred to earlier, and as far as another review potential, I don't say review scopes. I mean, I would certainly like, in when it comes to what we're talking about earlier, and I know DG1's there, it's going on at the moment, but I've got, I think, Willis touched on Stranraer and how that was implemented. It even goes into protocols and such, like that's the type of thing we'd get into in regards to that review. So I think there's 3 projects in particular, possibly a 4th actually, I would like to actually mention now, and hopefully we'll take them forward. One, to pick up on what Willie said earlier, Stranraer Waterfront. Said we should be looking at that. We'll look at these collectively, kind of across the board, look at these all at the same time. So Stranraer Waterfront, you've got, 2 Annan Gateway projects delivered to Annan through economic development, and and one was delivered in-house, and one was delivered through the private sector. So I think it'd be interesting to see the comparison, how that worked out. Was there any breach of protocols? Because I believe there was now. I mentioned that this committee quite a number of months ago now. And there was a primary school called Hotsbridge Primary School. I think that's, again, lessons could be learned there in regards to the Langham Primary. I think it's maybe similar, which is in the east of the region. I would like to at least look at that, and then we can understand, because I was certainly lobbied by some constituents at the time of the way that procurement process was undertaken and how it came to fruition. So I'd like to, again, when it came to the management, going beyond the thresholds of the prices indicated, so on and so forth, I would like to look into that. So, I mean, that would be a 3rd review. Is everybody okay with that? We're content to go forward with that? And we're okay then to identify the 3 lead members. Have we got 3 lead members? I mean, I'm more than happy to be one of them. In fact, I'd be delighted to be one of them. Yep. Then. Jane? Yep, Jane's more than happy. Excellent. Anybody else? Malcolm? Excellent. First class. No good. Patsy? We can take a 4th. That's absolutely fine, isn't it? Right. It's only a recommendation. Absolutely fine with that. Excellent. Everybody's welcome. Ian's got enough work. Ian just gave it, I've got enough on my plate. Thank you very much. Look. Yes. So, okay, so we've added an extra review to that. We've mentioned what there, and 2.3's went to 4 members, and that includes Jane, Malcolm, Patsy, and myself. Okay? Excellent. Happy with that? Thank you very much. I have no further business, I don't think. Whatever. Oh, sorry, I've got a number 10, sorry. There you go. You just went off for lunch, the cards are out, it's back in here, unless you're not going to say anything. But anyways, it's straightforward. The reason for this report is to just, I would just agree, is to agree the Dumfries and Galloway Council Scrutiny and Performance Handbook be updated to meet the current needs and developments across the organisation and to provide elected members and officers with comprehensive information and guidance on the operating principles and techniques of the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. So what we're being asked to do is, at recommendation 2.1, can we agree that Dumfries and Galloway Council Scrutiny and Performance Handbook be updated to meet the current needs and developments across the organisation? We've agreed that, excellent. And 2.2, can we agree that any changes to the handbook and the resultant revised draft handbook be considered at the proposed Monday afternoon service review workshops prior to submission of the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee for consideration and agreement? Agree with that as well? Thank you very much. Definitely no other business this time. Thank you. There you go.